Good evening. We're going to reconvene in open session. I'd like to welcome everybody for coming. It's nice to see an audience. I'd like to remind the audience and the board members to please silence your cell phones and your electronic devices. And tonight's board meeting is being live streamed on Ukiah Unified's YouTube channel, and the link is accessible on our website. Please, trustees, keep your microphones on and speak into it so that it can be picked up on the video feed. If audience members wish to address the board, please fill out a public comment form and turn it into Debbie, and I do have some of those. Public comment is taken for items not on the agenda for 5 minutes, and public comment for items on the agenda is taken at the time of the item, and each speaker is given 5 minutes. So, start with the flag salute. You stand for the flag salute, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And I'd also like to say we have a really lengthy agenda, so Deb and I worked through a little timeline, which I'm hoping to stick to tonight, which gets us out about 10 o'clock, I'm sorry to say. So I might try and corral you a little if it's going over what we thought was an appropriate time for discussion. So let me know if it's too tight of reins. Okay, and Deb, do you want to report out from closed session?
Yes, on item B8, consideration of classified leave of absence, the board voted to deny the classified leave of absence. It was a roll call vote, 6-0.
C4, we have approval of the agenda. We have a couple items we're going to pull.
Yes, we are pulling item H19 and H20. We will be bringing those forward to the board in February.
Is there a motion to approve the agenda with the pulled items?
I so move.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Student advisory report, Alexis Saunders.
So luckily, my report is very short, so hopefully it sticks to your timeline. Over the holiday season, throughout all of December, UHS as a school and a bunch of classrooms and leadership put this on through the Adopt a Family organization. The school in total adopted 32 families, and so that was really exciting because we were able to really help out in our community, and it was just a really successful holiday season for the school. And now that school is back in session, we're preparing for our annual Winterfest rally, which is going to be next Friday. And in that rally, it's during lunch, and we have a students versus teachers basketball game and some other activities. And I know that K-pop Club is going to be performing at halftime. So that'll be a first, and it'll be really interesting to see how they do. And next Thursday is going to be another blood drive at the high school. And this one's a little bit different because when students check in to donate blood, they can choose any ASB club to represent. And the club that ends up having the most representatives will win $500 for that club. And then the second most representatives, that club will be given $300, and third most will be given $200. So that club can use it for any purposes it wants. And that's it.
Thank you. Now we have public comment for items not on the agenda, and I have 4 forms turned in. If anybody else wants to speak on items on the agenda, if you could turn it into Debbie. And as a reminder, you will have 5 minutes for public comment. We ask that you please state your name clearly when you address the board. And who's timing over there today without a goal? Katie? So Katie will set the timer for 5 minutes, and if you've not completed your comment when the timer rings, I will have to inform you your time is up. And then if you have any written documentation, you may leave it with the executive assistant to distribute to us. Speakers are cautioned that under California law, no person is immune from liability for making intentionally false or defamatory comments regarding any person simply because those comments are made at a public meeting. So our first speaker is Susan Asbury.
Hi, my name is Susan Asbury. I work for transportation.
My concern is the usage of vans that were purchased, there's 2 of them, and also the usage of the charter buses for trips. Money is coming out of the transportation drivers, We rely on these trips. It's funds that we could use and money that some of us need in our pockets, and we're not getting paid for these extra trips that are being taken away from us. They're saying it's because that we don't have enough drivers where we actually could utilize our supervisor and he could drive, but instead they're just channeling into charters instead of utilizing us. I really don't know what else to say other than please help us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Kim Cooper.
Hi, Kim Cooper, school bus driver. We have actually a lot of issues, not due to our transportation major supervisor not trying. Gabe is trying very, very hard. We have no uniforms. We have buses that are pulling into schools half empty when they should be being utilized other places to keep kids from being to school late. You know, when I pull into the high school with a full bus of 18 kids, I've been saying it since November 1st. If we're short drivers, our buses should be full. They should be full. When we pull into a school and walk into an office, the secretary should not be asking us, who are you? Because they're not in a transportation uniform. It's not okay. It's not okay. We have people doing whatever they want to do, and there's only so much that Gabe can do. He's trying to learn, he's trying to help us. Our supervisor, I feel, does not care. It's going to start affecting, you know, a lot of drivers. We are losing 4 more this year. 2 are retiring this month. And as senior drivers, we're a little worried. We're worried. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next is Dell Turner.
Del Turner here, been with the district for almost 24 years. Have a lot of driving time, almost 300,000 miles. And we have some issues in our department that we need to take care of. We have, our new supervisor needs to step up and help us. I know that he comes from a different district, a different style. When I went down to do my CHP test, I always drove in the old Crown buses, the 5-speed buses, so that's a different checkout than what we do now with our new buses. And so I had asked him, hey, you know, can you help me? This is a little bit different now. And he gave me some information that I could have failed my driving test at the CHP. And I asked him, so it's not written, I said, I've always been taught this way from Holly and Kathy and Carmen, who have been with the district for probably over 100 years combined with all of them. And we have another driver who's in training right now. I'm worried. I'm really worried that he's not going to make it because he's not getting the right information. Like I said, when I went down to CHP, I asked Officer Moran these couple questions about dumping your air tanks, which is a huge thing, need brakes, we have dual air system, and my immediate supervisor said you do not have to do that. I asked Officer Moran in my checkout, down in testing, he says, if you do not do this, I will fail you. There's a lack of communication there, and we have new people that are coming in to be drivers, and they're not being trained properly. That's a huge issue, and we can't afford to have somebody go down there and fail their test because they weren't taught properly. We need drivers, and we're losing drivers. Myself, Kim, and we have one other senior driver, Debbie, who's off going to the academy. We're worried. We're really worried. We have a lot of youngsters who don't know what's going on in our department, and we need some help. Thank you.
Thank you. Our last speaker is Jason Hanover.
Hello, I'm Jason Hanover. I'm a new bus driver. I started in December. One of my biggest concerns is the bus stops. There's some bus stops that we have that aren't suitable for us to be stopping at, and a lot of us have talked about it. A lot of us had made the appropriate steps with our supervisor, and we're not getting anywhere. And he's told me on several occasions that he's going to go out there and measure them, and nothing's being done. No, nothing's being changed. It's actually one of our biggest rules is the 500 feet in front and behind us. And some of those turns we can't see all the way around the turns. And it's frightening, especially on hills with turns and all that, especially with these kids. You know, because some of the high schoolers, they cross and it's on roads that people go 55 miles an hour in a 25-mile-an-hour zone. And we can't control what the other drivers are doing. And that's a huge concern for me with these students. Our students are our biggest concern, and that's one of my biggest concerns. And I've brought it up to him several times, and I was designated to do this, and so I'm getting around to doing it. Okay, well, I've been there for now over a month, and nothing's being changed. And like I said, our student safety is a big thing for me, and for a lot of us, that's why we're all here. So, thanks.
Thank you, and we really appreciate you coming and speaking. It's always a little awkward that we can't respond to items that are not on the agenda, so just because we're not responding doesn't mean we're not listening. And we hope that you speak to Penny about your concerns, and we will also be sure to speak with our superintendent about it. So thank you for coming. Moving on to employee organizations, CSEA. Lisa.
Good evening, board members, Superintendent Kubin. Short report, let's see. We are currently closing our fire relief fund. We paid out approximately $4,000 to members within our unit for fire relief, disaster relief. We have a chief job steward training, the third level, which is the third and final level to be certified as a chief job steward, coming up February 3rd at Windsor High School. I think we have 3 members that will be completely certified as job stewards, chief job stewards, or they could be chief job stewards if they would like. And we decided on May 19th is going to be our CSEA barbecue this year. The Personnel Commission moved theirs to the end of April, so that's going to work out so we don't coincide, clash together. So we're going to be planning that at our next meeting, trying to get, some things together, what we're going to have, where we're going to do it. And we're just working on trying to get classified morale up. I want to thank the bus drivers for coming. We appreciate you. We need you, and our kids are what's important. So thank you for showing up and speaking your piece. That's all I got.
Thank you. UTA, Terry. You can thump it a few times.
Good evening. UTA is very pleased that our bylaws passed the CTA review, and we will be voting on them in the next couple of months. We're also very pleased with the governor's budget that fully funded schools. We look forward to the January 29th IB problem-solving training. We have 12 teachers attending the Good Teaching Conference, February 3rd to 4th. We have all sites that will be represented at that problem-solving training, by the way. We're really pleased about that. And we are also pleased we still have students entering our district from out of the area. We all know what that means. We also know that the teacher shortage is real. The state is doing things at the state level to help, and UTA e-board and negotiation team know that if teachers' salaries were competitive across the board, we would have a much better chance of attracting and retaining quality teachers, as this crisis threatens our profession. We're looking forward to a leadership presentation to UTA on the 5 whys and the strategies to help with attendance. Yesterday, or the day before, at our rep council meeting, many teachers from many schools were unhappy about the substitute shortage. We're not sure what to do about it, but I heard it from across the board. CTA is endorsing State Assemblyman Tony Thurman as State Superintendent of Schools, and that's it.
Which one is he? Remembering. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to our leadership report with Dara Brown.
Only a little nervous. Good evening, board members, Superintendent Kubin. Thanks for the opportunity to share kind of what's going on a little bit in leadership and at my site personally. And I don't often get the chance to kind of pause, but I also want to say thank you so much for your cards and the way that you remember us when you come visit our sites, because it really matters a lot to us and it is very meaningful. So I just wanted to take the opportunity to share that with you tonight. So in leadership, some of the things we're working on, I guess, primarily lately has been prioritizing items for possible budget reduction in order to just help support you in your decision making. We're beginning to work on professional development and leadership network for next year, and continuing work on addressing attendance issues and chronic absenteeism. And we're doing all of that with reviewing our data, both observational data, experiential data, as well as hard data points, and doing that in our small cohort groups, grade level groups, and then also in large groups as a whole. And it's really wonderful being a new principal, which I still consider myself in the second year, to be able to work with this group in this way and be part of such a collaborative and collegial team. Another thing that we're working on is just the plans for Saturday schools and trying to firm that up just to help address attendance and as a possible alternative to suspension. At Frank Zeke, we're working, one of the things a couple things we're doing to just continue to improve our academics is honing our skills as teachers. We're doing that through the use of learning rounds at our site, at all of our sites really. We're using part of every staff meeting at our site as site-specific professional development. We're improving our PLC process. We're using our educator effectiveness funds in terms of conferences, but also site-specific trainings. And one of the really cool things that we did recently was that we took a Saturday and we just went and unwrapped the standards again. So we went back to the standards and we really looked in detail in terms of what those standards are asking us to teach, skill by skill by skill, and the best way to do that. And that helps us inform not only our own teaching, but also improve our student learning. And so that was a really fun thing that we did that was super effective and that teachers are very excited about. We're working on better implementation of bridges and then working diligently to improve our student scores with reading. In our counseling department, we continue to work with students to problem solve, social skills, life skills in terms of like just telling the truth and expressing yourself clearly and being able to state your needs and accepting no for an answer. Those are just some of the things. We actually carry, every adult member of our staff actually carry green cards and yellow cards that were developed through support of our counselor on site. And the green card just gives kids a frame for stating what their need is and why that is their need. And then the yellow card actually gives a restorative conversation, so sentence starters to help students, for adults to help students problem solve with adults or with other students as well. And we're finding that that's really effective in helping students be more proactive and independent in their problem solving. We're super excited about our PE department and kids just gaining a deeper understanding of working together cooperatively, following rules, becoming more healthy. The really neat thing that happened actually this week is our PE teacher is now going to be a member of our leadership network team on our site. And we are doing that because we're trying to bring collaborative conversations into PE. And so he's going to be able to be part of our learning rounds and work on that as his department in PE, but with our paras and with our students, but also cooperatively as a group as we go through that with our leadership network on our site. I'm kind of excited now. I was a little intimidated by the Saturday school thing, but I'm kind of excited now about our Saturday Academy and what we're going to do with that. and being able not only to mitigate some absenteeism, but also be able to provide an academic and focused alternative to suspension at our site. And our Parent Engagement Center continues to be strong and gives an alternative for parents on our site who want to volunteer but don't feel comfortable in the classroom. So thank you for the opportunity to share with you.
Thank you. Any questions or comments?
Can I just say I love your enthusiasm? It's
Oh,
just
thanks.
wonderful.
Oh, well, thank you.
Thank you very much. Sounds wonderful. Moving on to acceptance of donations. This month we have a donation, anonymous donation, a donation from Carol Meyer, agent, State Farm Insurance, and Sharon Ford and North American Organics for a total of $1,350. Is there anyone who would like to approve the donations?
I move approval with gratitude.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. And now we have our Eagle Peak update.
So tonight, we wanted to give an update to the board on how things are going with our STEM magnet schools. So we have some principal, some staff members, some awesome students, and families here to just give a report to the board on how things are going.
Good evening, school board. Well, the STEM school implementation has been like the beginning of the movie The Matrix in the 90s, where the main character, Neo, within the first 10 minutes, enters this matrix and sees this incredible world in front of him. And that's kind of how we feel about our journey. We're beginning this awesome journey and progression through the matrix and all this wonderful technology. Getting right into the nitty-gritty, on that first slide, you're going to see our enrollment over the past 4 years. And you're going to notice that from 16-17 to 17-18, we had a jump, and we had kind of projected 60 or so students coming in. But the really interesting thing is if you look on the right-hand side, of the 69 new students, 55 are from non-UUSD schools, private schools, charter schools, other districts, et cetera. So we were successful, but we didn't quite accomplish the goal of mitigating some of the crowding at Pomalita and so on and so forth. So that's a goal for next. So it's an interesting statistic, right? So we grew, we wanted to grow in around 60 or 70, and we just were surprised where students came from. And then so for next year, we are going to be full in 7th and 8th, but there's room for, once again, growth in 5th and 6th. Currently, Calpella's 4th grade class is around 75-ish, plus or minus 75 or 80. So there's lots of room, especially in next year's 5th grade. And so we're starting recruiting, the recruiting process today, actually. Parents are receiving information packets about STEM parent nights and STEM visitations to schools and so forth. This is our budget that you've seen a few times. And one of the, I think, budgetary theories as we move forward is that, yes, it takes a while to implement, but ultimately you have finished implementation. So we built one STEM lab, for example, this year. Next year, because of the popularity of some of the STEM electives, we're going to convert a classroom into a STEM lab for 6th graders. So if you see, as an example, on STEM lab conversion for 18-19, that's for another classroom that's going to need to be converted. We're going to talk a little bit about curriculum instruction. This is Mr. Reeder working with some students to make the proper calculation for launching the rocket such that it has a successful launch and does not crash and burn up in the atmosphere. And they're doing a simulation using their Chromebooks. For transportation, essentially what happened, this was a little different than the original plan. We added extra stops onto what we call the Frank Seek Express, which is a bus that's existed for many, many years, a bus route that's existed for many years. We added stops south of the Frank Seek pickup and I don't know how many stops, Gabe, but several. That actually saved two, okay, and that actually saved money from the transportation budget. Remember, there was discussion about a whole nother bus line and so on. In the morning, the bus has been thin with the number of students, and it varies every single day, right? In the afternoon, it's been much more crowded for whatever reason. And the fire has affected numbers as well.
I'll just add, we added a Calpella stop on the way just because of displaced families who were living in town who went out to Calpella. So that bus does stop at Calpella.
On its way back?
On its way in, I think. On its way to Eagle Peak.
So that's actually good news. We added on to an existing route without having to spend a lot of extra money on another route. We've taken a number of awesome field trips, and there's more in the future, and I'd actually like to introduce Miss Elizabeth Deviney, who's a 7th grade teacher. Could you tell us about our trip we're planning for 7th grade real quick?
Our 7th grade team is going to be taking our 7th graders, thank you, is going to be taking our 7th graders in April, hopefully, down to the Marine Center in Sausalito, which is going to hopefully be a really cool experience. Our students are going to be able to take tours where they get to see marine animals that have been injured or need first aid of some kind. And so they'll go on this tour and they'll be talked to about 2 different topics. One of those topics is about medicine as it relates to marine biology and some of the diseases that animals in our current ecosystem could potentially be getting. And then the second one is about careers in STEM fields that have to do specifically with marine biology and with medicine. So we'll be taking 2 separate days to get our entire 7th grade out to that field trip, because we have a big 7th grade class. They'll also get to see the Bay model and spend some time there. And so it should hopefully be a great trip for them to get some experience with science and for us to take our kids for a new experience. So we're really excited about it.
We've participated in a number of professional development opportunities, and for the sake of time, I'm not going to read them all, but lots of STEAM and STEM-tastic type of professional development activities. One of the most important parts of implementing STEM at Eagle Peak is that in the core classes, that's our baseline. That's where if someone asks, well, am I a STEM student if I go to Eagle Peak? Yes, because we're delivering STEM in the core classes. And there are challenges to doing that. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And I would like to actually have Liz come back one more time and talk about what we're doing with the Finches.
So I teach language arts for our 7th grade students, and so as a language arts team, we came up with some units that we thought would be really fun STEM integrated units. And one of the ones that our 7th graders did was on The Martian. So the students read through that book and loved it, and had an opportunity to discuss the film as well as the book. And as we were doing that, we had some opportunities for them to experience VR for what's happening on Mars currently with the rovers. And then in my classroom, I put in a request last spring for us to have these little Finch robots that our school was donated for a couple of months this year that we were able to use, which was awesome just to see how we liked it. And so the kids had a great time programming them. So they used Scratch, which is a programming software that they learned how to use. And they were able to actually program the Finches, and then kind of like somebody at NASA would remotely pilot a rover on Mars, they remotely piloted these Finches through a maze in my classroom, just as if they were piloting a rover on Mars. So they had that opportunity, which was incredible. And as our school continues to grow in STEM opportunities, I'm hopeful that we can move past just piloting a rover like this Finch across the floor in my classroom to build your own version of a rover and then we'll see whose rover is working in our maze, and which one can get through the fastest. So we had that competition in my classroom. Kids loved it. A lot of students that sometimes are reluctantly engaged in classes thought the Finches were the greatest thing ever, and came to class and were really excited to learn and experience software programming and something with the rovers. So it was a great success.
So when you boil down STEM to its elements, robotics and technology is a major part. Another major part of STEM is actually design thinking and problem solving and working collaboratively to solve the great problems of the world and our community and nation, et cetera. And Ms. Easterly, if you could talk about 20% time. And awesome Eagle Peak students will queue up your project too.
Hi, I'm Claire Easterly, and I teach 7th grade social studies at Eagle Peak, obviously. And something we did that was really exciting this fall was a project called 20% Time, and it was something that was introduced to me at a tech conference last spring. It's inspired by Google, who used to let their employees spend 20% of their work hours on a passion project. And so we implemented that into 7th grade curriculum, and we allowed students to choose a problem in the world that they were really passionate about. It could be any subject. And they worked as a team collaboratively to try to solve that problem with technology. And it was a really exciting project for students because a lot of students don't have the freedom to choose what they learn in schools. Teachers usually tell them the curriculum, they tell them the standards, but this project they were able to choose something that they were really passionate about, and they were using technology to solve the problem in some way. And we had a whole variety of topics, and a lot of different technology was utilized, and it was a great learning opportunity because students presented their projects in front of their peers, which allowed them to just learn more from each other.
We have two examples we wanted to share with you. One is our students, and the second is I wanted to pass around some photos of another one of the really awesome projects that we had come through our classes. And these photos are of a website that our students created themselves. So the first picture is the front page of the website. It's all student-done photography, so they took all of the photos that were on the website themselves. And then they wrote all about it. Their website is about awareness for racism in the community. And so they did a whole bunch of research on what that looks like in our world and in schools, what we can do to help. So there's a whole bunch of writing on the different photographs so you can see. And then lastly, they actually interviewed somebody and created a video of that person's experience with racism in the world and posted that to their website. So they had this incredible multimedia website that they put together in order to bring awareness to a topic that they really cared about. And then we have three wonderful students here today, Ruby, Beja, and Peyton, and they're going to share a little bit about their project with you.
One more, please.
Just tell them what to do.
Project Water Everywhere is what we chose to be our 20% time project. My name is Ruby Mortier.
My name is Peyton Torres.
And my name is Beja LaRue.
Our 20% time project focused on the problem of an increasing amount of people not having access to clean water. We created an Instagram account and a website to help spread the topic and let more people know about the cause. We chose this project because we wanted to show how many people do not have clean water and how we take advantage of water every day.
One of the things we did to raise awareness of our issue was host a walk at our school, Eagle Peak, on Wednesday, December 6th. We had students in the school walking laps around the track, carrying jugs of water and looking at posters we had made. There were 14 one-gallon jugs and 2 2.5-gallon jugs that were a challenge for anybody who wanted to do it. These were some of the posters we created, and we wanted students to do this walk to experience what people all around the world have to do every day.
We helped this problem by raising awareness to people who do not have water in Africa.
Here are some pictures from the event. Our walk for water was very successful. At the beginning of each PE class, we told the students what they would be participating in. In every PE class, the jugs were immediately taken, and lots of kids wanted to try the challenge of carrying 2.5 gallons. If we were to do this again, we would have more gallons so more people could do it, and we would make it a community event so everyone could participate. We really enjoyed our 20% time project and would do it again. Thank you.
So yeah, I mean, it's awesome to enlighten students about the realities of water and how lots of places in the world struggle to get water. And it was a great project. Thank you, and great slideshow, by the way, too. A number of our teachers have TOSA time, and to boil it down and really repeat what we've talked about at a few previous meetings, teachers spend 3 days a week developing curriculum for the core, and that's been honestly a huge and radical challenge for us to work on. It's a tremendous shift. For example, if you're asking a teacher in a language arts class, all right, let's learn how to program robots now and then teach that to students. So that takes a lot of work. There's tremendous teaming and intervention that goes on, of course, because each grade level cohort, science, social studies, language arts, and math, all have the same group of kids. So when you give a team of teachers a cohort of students to work on interventions for behavior interventions and academic interventions, it's an extremely powerful model. And then on 1 day a week, we work on school-wide activities. For example, our goal in Science Fair is to have 98% of students participating. That includes students with IEPs, of which there are 70 at Eagle Peak. That's our goal. If we get close, we'll be happy, but it's great work, for example, providing access to Science Fair to students who struggle with learning difficulties in classes. This was a guest speaker who is part of the U.S. Army and is stationed in South Korea, and he's a network engineer, and he had lots to share about life in South Korea, near the DMZ, being a network engineer. Here's some of our latest thinking on pathways. And one of the crucial things in STEM that we've come to really believe is after you exit as an 8th grader, if you want to, we would like you to have some very strong tech skills or STEM skills, so that the elective pathways are not just going to be 10 different electives you can choose from every single year. This year, for example, most of the students are in an Intro to STEM elective, but ultimately, we think these 3 pathways are going to be exciting in terms of the skill sets students can leave Eagle Peak with. One is a music pathway, right, which we've talked about before. Another we've identified is an engineering and robotics pathway. So by the time the student exits as an 8th grader, we are designing and building the robots. We're not simply programming a pre-existing robot, we're designing and building. That's the goal. So as a 6th grader, on that pathway, they could take an Introduction to STEM elective, which we have this year once again for many students. And then they would take an introduction to engineering and robotics, and then an advanced engineering and robotics class as an 8th grader. Then, with digital media, we also have identified a pathway. And digital media is one of the perfect STEAM type of electives. And sometimes with STEAM, when you add in the art ideas, and try to do everything, right? Sometimes it's difficult to develop a defined skill set with students, a deep skill set. And digital media is actually the perfect STEAM type of elective, where you're doing lots of art, but often it's digital, with creating, working with videos and technology and film and so on and so forth. And our kids have done amazing work. Our yearbook actually has been award-winning for a number of years now in our digital media classes. So those are the 3 pathways we've identified, and we're also looking at exploratory activities in 5th grade as well. But it's the 7th and 8th grade years that the students go develop a deep skill set, if they'd like. Okay, areas of strength, our digital media curriculum, staff enthusiasm. Are we enthusiastic staff? The two of you are here? Yeah, great. Awesome use of technology to differentiate instruction. And it'd take me an hour to explain all of that, but great work with students with, who need differentiation. 100% of Google Classroom by core and elective teachers' use of Google Classroom. There are students that are in my office with behavior problems, and then I see them in STEM classes, and they're making these incredible breakthroughs. So giving at-risk students access through STEM activities has been awesome. 5th grade, we focused quite a bit of this year on coding. Boost is an academic intervention period that's been very successful for the most part. It needs a little bit of tweaking. For 18-19, we'd like to increase the amount of STEM time in 5th grade, continue and increase STEM in the core curriculum. We would like to, as you saw early on, recruit additional UUSD students. It's, once again, a big project supporting special education students in the science fair. Thinking K-12 and beyond with a STEM curriculum and STEM skill set. And then we have an opportunity to increase STEM activities in our boost period. We're trying to figure out what next year will look like, and at some point, at some point we're going to implement. So we've been thinking about TOSA time, and we've been thinking about our non-STEM TOSA, and at some point we will have implemented, and so we will not need as much budget, as much time, as much TOSA time. We feel that next year we need the existing model, but we recognize that this has been a wonderful opportunity that's been incredibly supported by the board with incredible finances, and that ultimately we will implement and we will not need as much support. We do believe, however, that we'll need the STEM TOSA time for another year. And with buses, continue to analyze transportation needs. I actually think bullet point 3 is inaccurate because we've basically determined there's one route, and we should, look at ridership, of course. And anything I missed, Liz or Claire?
I just have some pictures if you wanted to see of STEM in the classroom, so I'm just going to pass those around if you're interested.
Dan, can I clarify one thing?
Yes, please.
On the slideshow, it talks about eliminating the Student Success Coordinator TOSA position next year, and we're not 100% sure about that yet. Like Dan said, eventually over time we can look at some reductions, but it's not quite clear that we should do that yet. We're almost convinced we should continue it for one more year. So,
thank you.
Questions, comments? Trustee Arkin.
Yes, so Dan, what are you doing for recruiting from in-town schools?
So we're actually literally starting this week where parents receive their paperwork about when the presentations are for STEM school. Of course, Pomalita does presentations, for example, to Grace Hudson. And so that whole enrollment process is starting now. We have a road show that we take to schools. Last year it was just me, and it was sort of okay, but not great. So we're working on improving the road show next year, and we've got a few more bells and whistles and cool kid things to show students. So we want to show them with visuals and with the Finches, and once again the 20% projects about what we're doing, and so we present to a number of schools.
Trustee Van Sant?
I had a couple clarifying questions. I felt like Mr. Stearns was advocating to continue with this TOSA. Were we planning on getting rid of something? I don't even remember.
We had it's in the presentation, but we had taught, we internally, not we, the board, had kind of thrown around the idea of, are we ready to reduce a little bit for next year? And I think, as the semester goes on into next year, I don't think we're quite ready yet.
But had we ever thought we were going to be? That's what I can't remember.
The board had, we hadn't talked about it yet. There's a gradual reduction of budget as the years go on, but there was not a concrete plan to do that next year.
Okay. My second question is, are we, I almost hesitate saying this because this is not typically what we do, but are we going to be because we usually want to attract kids from out of district into district, but are we going to give priority to UUSD students for those 18 slots?
There are, yes, and there are
Okay.
rules about, deadlines for UUSD students contacting us, and we will be on the airwaves and Facebook and mailers, so everybody will know what the process
So
is.
the deadline for UUSD students is first and they get priority? Is that how it works?
The deadline for application, so Grace Hudson and Eagle Peak in our policy, the deadline for application or indication, I'm calling it an application, is the end of February. And so families need to let us know by.
For everybody, it's the same deadline for everybody.
For Grace Hudson and Eagle Peak, yes. And so those students will be considered first, and certainly UUSD students we take first, absolutely. After that, and if there are more students who apply than we have space for, there's a lottery that's held. And then from there, we establish a waiting list, and anything that comes in after that goes on a wait list. The challenge is we have a lot of space next year in fifth grade because the class from Calpella is a little bit smaller than normal. But kids don't tend to transition in fifth grade, so that'll be the challenge. We'll see how many additional kids in fifth grade want to come. If we can't fill it, then we'll probably not staff it, and then we'll have more space in sixth grade when kids tend to transition to middle school, so.
And just as a comment, I'm so thrilled with your school, Mr.
Thank you.
Stearns, and teachers and students. It's so great to see this. I feel like this is one of my, when I look back, I'm like, oh, something I'm really proud of. This is something that I feel really good about. So well done.
Thank
It's
you.
so exciting to see how deeply you're implementing this. When we first did it, I was like, oh, maybe they'll add a few little fluffy things around the edges, but it's really significant, and it's really lovely to see. And students, that was excellent, wonderful project. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Thank you.
So I'm thrilled. You guys have whatever you want from me. But I'm only one.
You better take advantage of that today.
Mr. Barrett's raising his eyebrows here. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Trustee Arkin.
I wanted to really say the same thing. It's been so fun to see the things that I've seen in those classrooms, and I've heard from other people what wonderful stuff you guys have been doing. And it is really fun to have done a project that, this is, not only is it working, but it's really a very positive thing that's happened in Redwood Valley, and you've done a really nice job.
Thank you.
Kids.
98% of it is teachers and kids and staff, for sure.
And I would
Thank
like
you.
to echo that. It is really wonderful to see. Very exciting.
Thank you.
Oh,
I don't want you to think I don't think it's wonderful.
Thank you.
And I do appreciated you being so confident about sharing your project. Thank you so much.
Yeah, very well done. Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you. Next, we have our presentation and discussion regarding adaptive reuse feasibility study for the River Valley School property. Deb?
So we have a great team here today to talk to you a little bit about, if you'll recall at the last meeting, the board declared Redwood Valley and Hopland schools surplus. And since then, we've had some interesting developments come up. And so we have Steve Dunicliffe here from the County of Mendocino and a team with him to talk to you a little bit about some ideas.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. I'm Steve Dunicliffe, Deputy CEO with the County of Mendocino. And my role and reason for being here in front of you tonight isn't directly related to my typical work as Deputy CEO. As everybody's painfully aware, we had the devastating wildfires in October. And as a part of the response to that, I was asked to serve on a housing task force for the county with a pretty broad-ranging mission of ultimately trying to increase housing stock in the community to make sure that there's more opportunities to house people that lost everything in that event. So the Redwood Valley Elementary School, it came, well, I was a member of the 7-Eleven committee, and so I was initially thinking about the school for a year before the wildfires, and my perception of the school and the potential opportunity shifted dramatically. When I started going through the school site, trying to come up with places to house survivors in sort of an emergency response capacity. We were working with FEMA staff, people from HUD, Cal OES, and trying to find places to bring in travel trailers. That we were dreaming about trying to come up with dormitory-style housing, and a lot of this was happening while the flames were still burning even, and so we didn't have a real good sense as to exactly how many people we were going to be trying to house. As you may be aware, the FEMA housing, the travel trailers have ultimately, right now we've got, I think, well, FEMA trailers have been staged at the Redwood Empire Fairgrounds. And the vision is that they'll ultimately be, infrastructure will be built out at the Lake Mendocino Cayenne Campground. And so what'll be nice about that is the community will have a greater resiliency and ability to place people on an emergency basis if we have another disaster in the future. But with that being said, my sort of interest in the school site and my belief that this might be a really good opportunity to see this reutilized as housing has kind of put me in an interesting position to where I'm trying to help serve as a catalyst for your board ultimately, and to potentially save time and provide assistance if your board is interested in moving forward with seeing this site converted into housing. So with that being said, I've got Jane Wilson from HUD is with me tonight, and she'll speak to you about a school conversion project that was done in Louisville. And we've also got Danielle Turner, who will speak to you about a school conversion project that was done in Utah. And Danielle is with FEMA. So just to move quickly through this, as you know, we've had historical housing challenges. We've had a housing shortage for a long time. Low vacancy rates, it's very hard to find rental housing. And really the bottom line is that we lost almost 400 homes in a pretty small, tight-knit community, which did nothing but make the existing situation a lot worse. The Redwood Valley Elementary School site is really interesting for a lot of reasons, and we've got a list here for you. And you know, it's right next to the downtown Redwood Valley community. I don't think that there's any other, well, there's no other sites that I'm aware of that would provide an opportunity for a similar density and number of housing units that could be built in the community. You know, we've currently got a site that's been vacant for 7 years, and it's got vegetation growing up. It's just not the community asset that it could be and should be. And I know that your board is aware of that. What's interesting, and I'll touch on this in another slide, is we've got some community partners and volunteers that are stepping up and trying to provide assistance in determining whether or not this concept is feasible, and they're doing it on a volunteer basis. And so Laco & Associates has volunteered some architectural services that just trying to come up with a way to demonstrate how these classrooms could be converted into housing units. And so it's important to just remember that this is just a feasibility concept. It's one way of you know, any number of ways that it could happen. But they've been able to determine where laundry facilities could be put in, how apartments would be laid out. And I believe that this concept has 21 residential units in the existing buildings. And so with that being said, we'll go ahead and we've got the two stories that I mentioned, and we'll bring up Jane Wilson to talk about this particular school conversion project.
Hi, good evening. I'm Jane Wilson. I'm with HUD, like Steve said. This is a project that I actually worked on in Louisville, Kentucky. I have a long history in affordable housing, and I was actually on the management side of it, not the development side of it. But it's still in operation today, almost 20 years later, which I hate admitting, but it's very true. It's a low-income multifamily project. It has 50 units of affordable housing, 1, 2s, and 3 bedrooms. It had an on-site laundry room. It has central heat and air, which is a big deal in that community. And then it had a community room, which was a also a big deal for the residents because it was available to them for birthday parties and the kind of things that they want to do on site. And then there was a learning center attached to it. Obviously, it used to be a school, so one of the things that the management company did was have after-hours homework club for the kids that lived in the building. And actually, I Google Earthed it today just to see what it looks like now, and there's actually a big school learning center built right behind the site now. It was in a residential area, predominantly residential, and it had been vacant for a long time. So it was a difficult situation for the school board there in the city because it was also in the heart of the city, so there was a lot of transit problems there. So it was a great reuse, and like I said, it's been almost 20 years and it's still in existence today. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Danielle Turner, and I'm a recovery coordination specialist with FEMA. But before that, in my other life, for more years than I will admit, I was, way many years, more than I'll admit. But I was the executive director of a housing authority in Salt Lake City, Utah. And fortunately for me, in 2003, I was asked by a neighboring housing authority to come and help them with a project they were interested in and help them restore this historic school. And this was, at the time, the longest continuing operational school in the state of Utah. And because similar things that happened with Redwood, low enrollment, and they had to make the painful decision to close it. And it soon fell into some issues with vandalism, and it was becoming quite obvious that the historical integrity could be jeopardized. And they tried to sell it a couple times, and the sales fell through. And the Provo Housing Authority, they took a quantum leap and stepped forward and bought the property before they figured out how to get the financing and whatever. So I had done a couple of projects with tax credits and historical grants and some other types of funding. So they asked me to come in and consult, and it turned out to be one of the most magnificent projects I've ever worked on. The school won, it won several national awards and state awards. It's been in several magazines. It's quite famous. If you ever, and my crew back here asked me, why would you? But if you ever watch a BYU football game, the setting is absolutely magnificent. It's behind it are the Wasatch Front Mountains, and so the big peak that you always see on the football game is right behind this school. It's a wonderful project. It ended up having 31 units, efficiency in one bedroom. They were low-income senior. It's got on-site parking and laundry room and also central heating and air conditioning. And then they turned the auditorium into a community room, and it just really turned into a beautiful room, those hardwood floors. And you've got that same opportunity with Redwood Valley. I mean, I see great things happening there. I think it could win awards. I think it's something that you'd be really proud of. So I'm hoping that we can help you. 11 years later, it's still the centerpiece of downtown Provo. It's in kind of an historical area. They also, the Rural Development Agency purchased the ball field and the outlying area, and they built 12 self-help first-time homebuyer homes on that property. So there's also 12 units of small homes on the site. And it took 7 levels of financing, so it wasn't an easy project. It takes a lot of layering, but California's got the sophistication and they've got that funding, so I think it can be done.
And I'll ask, because I know that you've got a full agenda, there's a 3-minute video on this project that isn't completely on point. It's an inspirational video, and I guess I'd ask the chair or the superintendent if you'd like to take 3 minutes on that video, or if you'd like me to just continue.
How are you on your schedule?
On my schedule, thank you for asking. I'm right on time.
I mean, 3 minutes to be inspired is okay.
Yes, I say inspire us.
Inspiration's coming.
Is this the Utah inspiration?
Yes.
Yes, Provo, Utah.
Think of the big windows in the Redwood elementary school classroom.
But it's quiet.
Let's pause it.
Sorry.
We don't want to miss any inspiration.
Hi, I'm Karen, representing the Landmark Commission, and today we are at 500 East, 150 South, at the Mazer School building. This school was built in 1898 and was named in honor of a prominent educator, Carl G. Mazer, who you may recall established the Brigham Young Academy, which later became Brigham Young University. The Mazer School building is listed on the National Register of Historical Places and was registered in 1998. At that time, it was registered as the oldest school still in use. A good example of public building with Romanesque features. Notice the entryway and the second-story windows. Absolutely magnificent. Our use of the school ended in 2002 because the district could not sell the property to a private sector. The building appeared that it may end up being demolished. However, in 2003, a miracle happened. The Provo City Housing Authority acquired the property and converted the property into apartments for low-income senior citizens. It now houses 31 affordable apartments, which consist of 25 one-bedroom apartments and 8 studio apartments. The exterior of the building was preserved almost to its original setting, and the interior work preserved the wide ceilings and a most beautiful staircase inside. The project is considered a tremendous success by both the affordable housing advocates and historical preservation opponents. It is a beautiful place, and I am glad that it wasn't demolished, that was preserved, and is available for people to drive by and see even today. My name is Judy, and I live at the Mazer School Apartments. I feel so happy that I'm here. I've never lived anywhere, and I've lived a lot of different places in the United States, that I have loved like this I have here. The apartment itself has been perfect for me. I always admired the big tall windows and the tremendously high ceilings. This is something that I look at every day and think, where would ever I have found an apartment like this that I could have been in, especially in Provo. The neighbors are kind. We have a wonderful manager. Everything is perfect about this place.
So while the PowerPoint's coming back up, you know, there's a lot of reasons why something like this wouldn't work, and there's a lot of reasons why, if we're not careful, we can end up 4 years from now without getting off the starting blocks with a project like this. And I'm talking again, of course, about potentially converting the Redwood Valley Elementary School into housing. What's interesting, though, is we've got, as I'd mentioned, a lot of interest and a lot of potential partnerships. And I think it's important that if your board feels it's a good idea to try to grab some of that. And as I'd mentioned, Lako and Associates, which is a local firm, they've already volunteered some architectural services. And right now they're looking at the septic system plans. And they're looking at the soil to try to determine the carrying capacity of the septic system. And they're doing that on a volunteer effort. Of course, as a county employee, I'm here in front of you in a way that I typically wouldn't be. RCHDC, Rural Communities Housing Development Corporation. They are doing some volunteer support on this. They're working on a sources and uses table, and again, it's just an attempt to determine feasibility of moving a project like this forward. And we've got FEMA and HUD here right now, and typically FEMA wouldn't be in the discussion at all, and FEMA, I think, is committed enough to trying to help communities with long-term recovery that they've brought in Danielle in the position that she's in. And HUD, typically we don't work with HUD directly. We access HUD funding through Housing and Community Development at the state. But we've got multiple folks from HUD offices throughout the country have been through the facility, and they seem to see a lot of potential. And if we have HUD staff kind of excited about the project, I think it could help ensure that funding might be available through HCD in the future. So with that being said, potential next steps, I think that it's on your agenda, trying to, to have council help identify next steps that you would need to take if you were going to move forward with a project like this. If you direct your staff to prepare an RFP, the RFP model that gets created can really help focus a discussion on what you guys would be interested in asking for and what this could look like. Determining the water and septic service capacity, as I'd mentioned, Laco and Associates is doing some initial volunteer review of that. The Redwood Valley Water District board meeting, they met tonight as a board, and I spoke to their board just telling them about the potential of this project because, of course, there's a moratorium on connections out there. But the school district does have an existing connection on site. And so just trying to start that dialogue as soon as we can with the water district. And then another issue is that the site is currently zoned public facilities, and it would need to be rezoned. And I think that your board hopefully can have a discussion in the future about the possibility of starting that rezoning process, which is 6 months best case, starting it as soon as possible, even if you're not fully committed to the concept. As long as you're clear and comfortable with the fact that you would be able to discontinue processing that application at any point for multiple months. And that way you'd avoid losing time as details might be falling into place. And then, in the near future, if you direct your staff to develop an RFP, you could release the RFP and see what the developers in the community think about the site, and putting together a committee to look at those proposals. So with that being said, we're available for questions. The names are up there. Chris Watt with Laco was going to be here and threw his back out, so he's not available. He was our technical expertise, but we could certainly answer any questions that you might have.
And Steve, just to be clear, we're talking about not demolishing the school, but actually using the existing buildings to create one-bedroom apartments, or?
So most of them, I believe, are 980 square feet, and so it would certainly be one bedroom, potentially two bedroom. It could be squeezed into some of those, but yes, the concept is to not demolish the existing buildings, but convert the existing buildings into housing units. And then that wouldn't utilize the gymnasium, so the gym would remain an asset that could be utilized in some way. And I think that your RFP it could potentially invite proposals on how that gym could be utilized as well.
I mean, preserved as a gym, you mean, or utilized for housing?
Well, so one thing that you'll need to weigh is when you control a property like this, you can get really detailed in how you require proposals to be submitted. But what you do is the more restrictions that you put on, the more likely, the more that you drive cost, and developers are forced to kind of cover the uncertainty, and so it makes it a little bit less. You just need to be careful in weighing how you structure an RFP. But personally, I think that funding sources are out there that would be very supportive of utilizing that as a community facility, a gym, whatever it might be. But you'd run into a host of issues that a developer would need to work through. I mean, a housing developer most likely wouldn't want to be operating a functioning gymnasium. The two uses could be very complementary, but a respondent would most likely need to identify a partnership that could operate the gym.
So any Questions? Trustee Arkin?
So I'm wondering, is our beginning process looking into selling or leasing the property? I mean, is that how we would start? And then, once we decide what works for us, we would then go into the rezoning that you're talking about?
So what I would suggest is so whether, if your board wanted to see that site converted into housing, the more flexibility that as long as your board was comfortable receiving creative proposals, I would suggest that you leave it as open as you can to let a developer help figure out how to pencil the project out. And, some responses might be buying it from you outright. Some might be asking you to donate it. Some might ask to lease it from you for 10 years and buy it, on the 10th year. So I would suggest that you don't need to resolve that question before you would put out an RFP. I would also encourage you to consider, because the rezoning process can take 6 months, and that's really a best case, typically is 6 months for a rezoning. If you are comfortable beginning a rezoning process, that could get underway, and it wouldn't be final until it went to a public hearing at the Planning Commission for action. And so to avoid losing 6 months at the back end of a project, you could start the rezoning earlier in the process while you're working out the details, and you could always hold the final action on your application if need be to make sure that you were comfortable and not making any decisions before you had all the information.
So B, if you look at the PowerPoint for the recommended next steps for the school district, it's a little bit expanded from the recommendation that we put in the report. But, I would recommend, what we're interested in is the board interested in us spending a little bit of time on this and looking into it and pursuing it. I think it has exciting possibilities. We have a lot of people right now who are helping and supporting us, and I'd like to recommend to the board that we implement the next steps. And it doesn't commit the board to this project, but it gets us started down the path.
I guess it's not a concern, but it's a concern, is what the community, what we'll think about that, going in and doing that to Redwood Valley School.
It has come up at a few different meetings that I've been to, and I will tell you the response has been really positive. People, like at the Redwood Valley MAC, people were really, really excited to think of that school being used for affordable housing.
I think it's right now, sounds very exciting and nice possibility of things, and I can see why we really need to start doing something, and the 6 months and starting now makes good sense. It doesn't mean that we'll do it, but it does mean we'll be ready if we're going to do it. That's what you're talking about, right?
Yes, and I also want to be very deferential to your staff and make sure that you all are comfortable. I want to just reiterate that if we're not careful, way too much time can pass, and especially with a process that will be a relatively slow process. I just want to do everything that I can to garner resources, to provide you with support, and to try to identify timelines that should be started as soon as possible so that you don't end up with accidental delays. I mean, as a example, let's say that 3 months from now, your board decides that you've got an RFP that you'd really like to issue, and you put it out and you get a phenomenal response that you can live with. If you haven't considered the rezoning process, that can become almost a fatal problem for a developer that might be buckled in and ready to go right away. Again, the frustrating reality is these things take a lot longer than I ever wished that they would. Even so, despite our best attempts to be proactive, it will be slow if you all decide to move forward with this. But I also think that even though you don't have all the information now, if you're working with your staff to try to identify irons that you can put in the fire so that they don't become impediments, and especially when you don't have to make a completely committed decision. You know, like again with the rezoning, you could theoretically start a rezoning process without having all the information, with an ability to pull an application before it went to hearing.
Trustee Nelson.
Steve, why does the rezoning process take so long?
I think that there's an initial study, it's just kind of what ends up happening. 6 months is oftentimes a best case. I think that many rezonings end up taking closer to a year. And a lot of it's with the back and forth as a project is being scoped, as information's being put together. I think that this one, it could potentially be a little bit easier because it's actually in a water district, and as long as the water, the district's ability to provide water doesn't become an impediment, you'd potentially have an expedited process. And when I talk about any number of things that could become impediments or that could slow this down, you know, the septic system review is underway right now, at least a preliminary study. It's possible that it'll turn up that the septic system lines are crushed or damaged, you know, and but if everything works on a best case track, you know, you might be able to get at least a really solid proposal to consider fairly soon.
I am kind of excited about this idea. I would encourage the county to fine-tune their processes for going through things like this, especially for all people doing business that have projects going through the county, but especially for these things that have impacted this fire area. Just for our community, I think it'd be really healthy to have the county really jump on board and focus on these things.
I can tell you that if I may, through the chair, I guess to be proper here, this certainly has the county's interest and attention. I can tell you that.
Awesome.
Trustee Montpere?
I want to know if I understood it correctly when you were talking about not limiting the scope of the project. To me, I would be inclined to consider only affordable housing. And I would be very concerned about mixing affordable and market price housing, just because a developer who's doing market price housing would have a distinct advantage in terms of the amount of time, whereas affordable housing, and especially now because one of the major sources just got eliminated at the federal level, and the layering can sometimes take years to put together. So, but are you saying that it would be in our best interest not to designate certain types of housing?
So be careful not to put too much importance on what I say here, because really this is a decision for your board. Because there most likely will be some parameters that you want to set. I'm just saying that be careful not to get too involved in setting parameters, or else you can make it less desirable for people to respond, whether it's RCHDC or anybody else. So just you'll want to weigh that carefully. And I think that if you give the direction and your staff prepares an RFP, that model that would come before you at some point could absolutely spark more specific discussion among your board members about what you'd like to see.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Trustee Barrett?
I'm very excited. There it is. I'm very excited about this. And I've been wanting something done with Redwood Valley for a long time, because I think it's a shame that it's sitting there unused and deteriorating. So I'm very much in favor of let's get this show on the road, and let's get start with the zoning. Yeah. Do I need to make a motion?
I think, Trustee Van Zandt, did you have a comment, or are you fine with her making a motion to?
Yeah, I was going to make the motion too, but you're welcome to do it. I think this is awesome. I think we should go full steam ahead. We need to capitalize on this opportunity and go for it. Let's do it. Let's do it as fast as we can. The one tiny thing I'm a little worried about is we're not housing developers. We don't know anything about it. It's way out of our league. Is there a way to make sure that our lack of expertise in being housing developers doesn't get in the way? And can somebody just do this for us in terms of issuing the RFP? Because we're not, I just don't want to monopolize your time, Deb, on something that's way outside. Maybe you are a housing developer in a past life, but it's not
English teacher.
not how we know you. So I would love to make a motion for all these things. Let's do it all and add on to that. Contract it out, get somebody else to do all the work as well.
Do you have a comment on that, on the RFP part?
No, that's fine. We would work with legal counsel and others to develop an RFP. Although I'm an English teacher, I would not write the RFP myself because it is not my area of expertise.
Is there someone that can write the RFP for us, Steve, for free?
Not that-
Or even at low cost, whatever?
Well, not that I'm immediately aware of, but what we're committed to do and what our team has already been working on is developing model RFPs. And so Danielle and Jane and Chris Watt, the city of Ukiah has issued several RFPs for similar projects. Of course, not with school districts as the property owner, but where the city has controlled land and has requested proposals to spur development. And so as I've envisioned this process, I would think that your district staff would be involved in letting the RFP, but the ultimate goal would be that you select a developer that then becomes it's a turnkey type operation. And I think that the other thing that's important is for your board to be conveying interest, if you have it, and it sounds like you do, to your staff and giving them as much flexibility. But there are, so like with the rezone, we've gotten an estimate that there's that to prepare a rezone application would cost about $1,500. If the application is processed, or if the application is put together, the county fee is about $11,500 to process it. I've been working with Gabe, or talking with Gabe about the fact I'm trying to identify funding through this recovery initiative that might help pay some or all of the county fee. I think that your district would need to come up with the $1,500 to prepare the application. But as long as and of course there'll be other items coming back before your board, but as long as your staff has the flexibility to move forward as far as they can and come back to you to your board when they need to, I think that's an ideal.
I'd just like to clarify, I don't want to quibble about $1,500. I mean, I think we should just, if we need to allocate money today for staff time or consultants, I'm prepared to do it, and a lot more than $1,500. So, I mean, I don't want to fuss around fees. I'd rather just pay
Do you
them.
want us to attach some fees to this, or is there a motion to direct staff to consult with the council with the immediate next steps? No, the near future.
I so move.
Do you- And do you need any money attached to that, or do you?
Well, I think the amount is, I mean, if it went over the threshold of what we're authorized to do, we'd bring it back to the board, but.
What's the threshold that you're authorized to do?
Is it 15,000? It's 15,000.
Yeah.
Anything over 15,000, we need to bring to the board.
Can we increase that to 50 for this project?
It'd
I
have to
don't
come
want to
back to
slow
the
us
board.
down. I mean, but then it just slows things down.
We won't. We'll probably bring something back. We'll work up the RFP. We'll get the rezoning process started with our $1,500, and then, and do all of the next steps on here, and we'll bring the RFP back to the board for sure. But I don't know that you need, I mean, you could authorize us to not to exceed a certain amount. That would be fine.
It's going to take a while.
But it will take a while before, but I appreciate your enthusiasm, Megan, and your
I'm
ability.
tired of barriers.
No, to give us
Yeah.
flexibility. I
Okay.
totally appreciate that.
Okay, so they're all in favor?
Aye.
Okay,
Great, thank you.
excited to see what happens next.
Then we'll
Thank
have
you.
an inspirational video too.
And thank you for all your work on this. We really appreciate you working with the school district on this.
Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
Thank you. So I was hoping to do one more item before we had a break. Are people okay with that, or do you need a break right now?
Go for it, Zoe. Sure.
We move on to South Valley Site Improvements Cost Update. You got a break now? Sorry, Dawn. Okay, 10-minute break, then we'll come back and hear your abysmal news.
We have a project update and discussion of increased costs for this project. And my thought would be to go through the PowerPoint presentation, and then I have Don Alameda, the architect for the project here, and Gabe Sherman to answer questions that might come up. So progress to date, the project was submitted and we've received approval from the California Geological Survey Office. That's just recently. And we're awaiting approval from the Division of State Architect, DSA. We have just recently had prepared a detailed cost estimate using current assumptions since the initial feasibility study with the cost estimate had been done back in November of 2016. This is a slide from that board meeting, November 10th, 2016, when the board approved option 2, which was the new modular building to replace the current administration building and the site-built classroom and food service building that would also include some indoor eating area for the students. The total budget approved at that time was $1.8 million and some change. So there are changes that have occurred that have come about, and we have included these additional requirements in the new cost estimate. And specifically, they are that we need to replace the current fire alarm system campus-wide. We need upgrades to the student bathrooms. For the CTE classroom specifically, there's a fire sprinkler system requirement. It involves designing it and so forth. And then there's substantial increase due to the escalation of construction costs, and there's a number of reasons for that. One of them being the recently passed Prop 51 that approved $9 billion statewide for school facilities, $23 billion in local K-12 and community college bonds, which have passed. Of course, the recent fires that included the destruction of thousands of buildings in our, particular area, including Santa Rosa, and then from that, a skilled construction labor shortage. So all of that has led us to, just a little background, the project's funded out of Fund 26, which is our community development funds that come from the previous redevelopment agency, the successor oversight agency. We get the community development funds. Our current cost estimate indicates that we would minimally need additional funding to complete the project in full of a little over $1 million, $1,065,000. So we have currently in Fund 26, the $1.8 million is budgeted. The remaining balance is $820,000. And according to information from our county auditor's office, we can expect an additional $253,000 by the end of this fiscal year. If you look at the amount we need, minimally is the $1,065,000, but the cost estimate provided a range. Worst case scenario in a lot of different areas in the cost estimate, it would be up to 2.2. If approved, the total project budget would go from the 1.8 million to 2.8 up to 4 million. That's a lot of money, I know, but that's what the numbers came in at. So if you approve the $1 million, $65,000 increase, the project would then proceed as we've planned, and we would advertise for bids for the construction work. You would then award a contract to the building contractor, in compliance with our public contract code like we always have to do. Notice to proceed could be issued with the start time of June 2018 as planned. Possible concerns would be that we don't receive any bids, we have non-responsive or not responsible bids received, or that the bids received would be over the budget. Because again, all we would have available would be that minimum amount that we would need. I know it's very sobering to think of this much additional cost. So if the board decided not to approve the budget increase, we could go to Plan B, which we've cost out, and that would be to replace the admin building due to the hazardous materials and we have already ordered the modular. We would not build the CTE classroom at this time, but we would do the upgrade to the student restrooms, replace the fire alarm system, replace and repair the blacktop on the basketball court, which is a big need for the site. And also, in place of the CTE building with the food service, we could build a shade structure that would include an eating area. The estimate for that is a little over 1.5 million, which would actually result in a budget savings at this time of 240,000. So something that isn't on the slide is that with that eating area, we've spoke with Jim Stewart, and we could get a portable trailer or food equipment truck to come in and, you know, park or be housed under that shade structure with the eating area. So it would be quite doable to serve students from that. He said it's compliant, it's something that we could do at not really too much of a cost either. He's looking at costs right now. So the conclusion would be, we had thought that the bid specs could include the CTE classroom as a bid alternate if you approve the budget increase, and that way we could award the contract depending on how much the bids came in for, with either just the Plan B or also include the CTE classroom if we could afford it, and then the project, one way or another, would still proceed this summer. New information that we're still vetting is the possibility of a CTE facility grant from the state that would provide us a match for that piece that is the CTE classroom. So I just was talking to Dawn, as a possibility to still do it as an alternate and then ask the contractor to make the price good for the amount of time we would need, which would be the following summer probably before we could start that, because we can't apply for the grant if we meet the eligibility criteria, which is still to be vetted in September of 2018. I'm sure you probably have questions, so I'll ask Dawn and Gabe to come up.
Trustee Nelson.
It's a lot of information, I know.
The information wasn't really high, but the amount of money was super high.
Yeah.
This is kind of off subject, but since we're still discussing developer fees, if we were collecting developer fees, would we be able to put it towards a project like this?
Superintendent Cuban?
I don't believe so. We would need to check with legal counsel, but developer fees are to be used for increased enrollment, and that particular site doesn't necessarily have increased enrollment.
Okay. All right. Still working on that project in my head. The other question that I had is Plan B saves us $240,000, and we swap out the CTE kitchen concept for a shade structure.
Right, and no classroom at this point.
We would need to figure out, though, what we would serve food out of, because it's currently being served out of the office, like the back part of the office, and the new office building does not have that built in. It was built into, we expanded that classroom space to include a food area. So we had some thoughts about a mobile truck that we could use there and maybe other places.
But the mobile truck would be another expense,
It
like a
would be,
roach coach, right?
Like $50,000 or so, yeah.
I have to say for the $240,000, my gut, before listening to the rest of you guys, is that we should bite the bullet and continue, not do Plan B. I mean, it's not a huge savings for the amount of increase.
That's not the increase. The increase is over $1 million.
But the savings, if we go to Plan B, is only $240,000.
From what we originally budgeted, not from the actual cost.
Maybe my small
So
brain
see,
is not better.
we.
Go back on that slide,
we
Penny,
approved
Okay.
that shows the.
1.8.
Right here.
No,
And it's
keep-
gone up another million.
Another
Keep going
million.
back, right
In the
there.
shade structure.
So the additional amount needed to complete the
Do the whole
project as approved originally is the $1,065,000. If we eliminate the CTE classroom, then it goes to the,
1.5.
yeah, 1.5, and we would save from the original budget 242.
Okay. I got it.
Okay.
And just remember that the number we're talking about is the low end of the range, so the high end is almost a little over double, could potentially be 4 million. So, and, you know, a lot of that major range is directly due to the volatile climate right now. We're seeing huge shifts and changes in across the board in construction, so it's really hard to pin it down.
But Tyler, we won't know unless we approve it as a bid alternate.
Right.
Trustee Van Sant?
I think the recommendation makes a lot of sense. I guess I'm kind of pessimistic. I don't think anyone's going to build this, and if they do, they're going to want to charge a lot for it. I mean, if everything we're hearing is true and all of the, it just doesn't seem like a good time to construct sort of optional projects right now. Am I right, Don?
Yeah, we've kind of hit a perfect storm here.
Yeah, that's
I
what I'm
haven't
afraid
seen
of.
this bad for 18 or 20 years. And it kind of started in 2008, the recession. A lot of workers retired, and nobody backfilled them, and it's been getting worse and worse and worse. And then we had the fires, and then trying to push things forward, there was a lot of bonds passed to move things forward, but everybody passed at the same time. So it kind of all converged to who's going to build it for you. And if they are, we're going to ask a pretty sum for it, you know. So, yeah.
So-
But also, it's not, it may not go up as fast in the future as it is now, but it's still going to be more expensive in the future. Yeah.
This is sad.
Yeah, it is. My take on it is we're this close to being completed with a permitted set that we might as well see what the market's going to bear. We may not like what it bears, but there's a chance that
We'll get information.
we'll get information and we'll know if, you know, where we are with it.
And I agree that I mean, we need to replace that admin building no matter what.
Oh, yeah.
And I know all of you had selected a mobile for that, so that could happen quickly.
Yeah, and the lion's share of that number is already committed because they're building that, you know.
The building, because we're buying the
building,
buildings that
yeah,
we've made.
yeah.
Right.
So, I mean,
I-
it gets,
I would, when we're ready, I would make this motion to approve the bid specifications and include the CT classroom as a bid alternate.
Any other comments before that motion's made?
I
Is
will
it-
second that motion.
Is this with the alternate bid as well? Does that include in that?
Yeah, it was the kind of carry on with Plan B, but see what Plan A would cost.
yeah, I mean, yeah.
And I guess I would also just suggest, Deb, that since the likelihood of having that fabulous place for that school seems dimmer than it was, if we can think of other ways to support that school and meeting some of the needs that we had talked about, I don't know what it would be, but
Yeah.
kind of a little bit go back to the drawing board so we're ready in case it never happens or it doesn't happen for many years.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean,
and-
the one thing that we're vetting is the CTE money, and it's going to take a little finessing. But, you know, this last bond, there's earmarked $500 million for CTE. Next month, they're going to award $125 million of it to various schools, and it's a competitive thing. Then the next opportunity to apply is going to be sometime between February and September. Our one hitch that we need to overcome is it's for a comprehensive school, high school. So we'd have to finesse it with being kind of a joint thing with the, you know, with the high school, but that doesn't say it has to be at the high school.
Yeah.
But the way that CT is structured, it's a 50-50 match. We've already got the match. And every single project, a new one, is up to $3 million. So we would be able to, you know, if we could finesse the hurdles of being not a comprehensive school, but maybe joint venturing with the comprehensive school. If we get past the first hurdles, they've got the rest of the money to finish the project. It's just a matter of time and effort to try to do that. So,
Yeah, it's really sad.
Trustee Arkin?
I do want to say CTE is in right now.
Right.
And so we should take advantage of it because you don't know when they're going to pull the plug on that.
Yeah.
And so at least we need to know what we can get out of this.
Right. Yeah, and like I said, it's a competitive thing. One thing is they want to serve the largest student body, so that makes a lot of sense to add the high school to be competitive. But the other competitive thing is we would be going in September saying we have a DSA permit, we're ready to go, and it's not going to go unless you give us this. I'd say that would be a pretty compelling reason, and maybe with a nudge from our state representative or something. I could see it happening, but I'm forever the optimist. So.
Yeah, it's discouraging. I feel really badly for South Valley, since it was exciting to think of them having this.
Yeah.
Do you have a comment before we vote?
I was just going to say, if we can't get the CTE building done and we have some savings, maybe we can use that savings on some other projects at South Valley. So anyway.
Could we keep that money aside so that it's earmarked for that possibly?
Penny, don't suck it up somewhere else. Leave it, leave it in South Valley.
No, they've already allocated it to the STEM program, because you promised.
Don't want to
say
do
that
that
out
anyway.
loud, Gail.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Good luck.
Thank you very much.
Penny, you're staying up there, right?
Oh, I am.
While Penny's getting her things, we wanted to do a quick overview of the governor's budget proposal, and it looks really positive, so that's really great news. So we will, Penny will just cover a few key points.
Yes. I attended the school services governor's budget proposal workshop on Tuesday in Sacramento, and just put together some highlights of that for you. The major K-12 proposals for next year, instead of the 97% funding, or I believe it was 66%, they are going to 100% fund the local control funding formula. Originally, that was to be in 2021, so 2 years early. Interestingly enough, to coincide with the last year of our governor's reign, to fully fund that. And then also, very important, the amount for allocating of one-time discretionary funding currently being proposed. Katie Aguilar prepared a LCFF comparison. This is an estimate. This is without, a lot of double checking, but because it was only yesterday that we had the numbers. So what you see here is the current year, next year, which is the governor's budget proposal for 18-19, and then when we adopt 18-19's budget, we'll always have the following 2 years, the subsequent 2 years for our multi-year projection. The gray column is what we thought these numbers would be at first interim, just in December. And then the turquoise column is the change since the latest information from the governor's January budget proposal. The difference from first interim to the new information, and then I added a column, the amount of increase over the prior year. That amount is what we use in our compensation formula. So the farthest column to the right that says amount of increase over the prior year. So that's taking 18-19, and those numbers are how much more we're getting next year than we had this year. And then 19-20, how much more than what we received in 18-19. And what you see is the big increase is next year, the 3.2 million overall. Now that's always comprised of the two components of our local control funding formula, being the base and supplemental concentration grant. But then it levels off because once we're fully funded, then starting in 1920, all we're going to receive is COLA. And that's half as much again for each of those years. And the concern that I have and every school district has about that is that that's probably not enough money to fully fund our pension cost increases. So that COLA won't quite cover that. But anyway, I just wanted to give you this information so that you have it. Uh-oh, I blew it up. What happened? I didn't do that. I did? Oh, okay. Sorry, I didn't know I had that much power. Okay. One-time discretionary funds. Now, this is very exciting. Currently being proposed at $295 per ADA is a little over $1.5 million. Now, if the economy slows down before we enact the budget, or the governor enacts the budget in June, then it could certainly, they could use this money to balance it. So, that's what's being proposed right now. Just real briefly, some other of the major proposals on our system of support and new accountability system, the dashboard. They're looking at targeted assistance for eligible districts. We don't know how much money. And then they're talking about adding a transparency requirement for districts to show the linkage between the LCAP and the budget. And our accounting department and Katie Summers with Ed Services, they track every single initiative with every site, so we're well covered there. With CTE, they're looking at collaboration between the community colleges and K-12. They want that to happen. They're not quite sure how they're going to allocate it yet. Nothing's defined there, but they're working on it. Whoops, be careful. Special ed, the governor and everyone knows that no one receives enough money. So they're going to put some things in place. They're going to require SELPAs to complete a plan aligning the SELPA's services and resources with the member district's LCAPs. They're going to require SELPAs to summarize their expenditure and services and how they align with improved student outcome strategies. They're going to provide $100 million to increase and retain special ed teachers. How that'll look, we're not quite certain. It could be the state perhaps assisting with credential costs or something. Early ed, money for more availability to include early ed for children 0 to 5, birth to 5 years. So that's pretty much it on just the highlights and how much time we had to prepare. So the governor will eventually sign and enact the budget, by June is the deadline. But we'll have many changes before that. And so I want you to remember too, that our second interim budget report will be based on the information that was just provided in the governor's January budget proposal. And we recommend that we proceed with our budget efficiency discussions, but at this point, not necessarily place a target dollar amount to the reductions. We will have a new multi-year projection in March with the second interim. So that's it for that.
Penny, I just wanted to make a comment.
Sure.
There were a lot of ideas generated through our budget reduction process and budget enhancement process. Some of them have some good validity. We should always be operating on an efficient and lean budget. And so we just want to continue that process to see if there's anything that we can do to just budget very tightly in our district so that as things come, we get to our 9% reserve level, and as things come up, we can potentially give increases and other things.
So we're still
Trustee
having
Van
that
Zandt?
budget discussion.
Yes.
Did you want to speak? Yes, Trustee Van Zandt?
So we are continuing that, we're still having that discussion,
We
so
are.
we can comment on that at the time?
Yes.
Okay. Your projections assume a stable enrollment, probably? Or
Yes.
Okay.
Currently projecting the same enrollment ADA as first interim.
Which was accurate? Was first
Which
interim?
is probably conservative.
Okay.
And we won't know, unfortunately, what our P2 attendance, our period 2 attendance is until after second interim.
So second interim will continue the conservative enrollment estimate?
Except we'll have more months to include, so we could possibly increase it if we're maintaining or increasing
I mean,
enrollment.
because you kind of all have an idea.
Mhm.
Okay.
Trustee Montpere?
What exactly do they mean by inclusive early childhood education?
There's more information from the workshop that I could provide you. I don't know off the top of my head right now.
Okay. And the other question I have is when you're talking about the one-time discretionary funds, when would we actually know that we're going to receive those?
When the governor enacts the budget.
So July 1st,
Yeah,
June.
it's due legally by July 1st, although in the past they've been late with it, but in the most recent years, it's been before the end of June.
Okay. Okay. I just, as a board member, I was very excited about the increase in early childhood funds. And I don't know where you introduced the idea, but I really, there have been other times in the past when these funds have been available, and we have not been in a position to take advantage of them. So I guess my concern is that, and if it's only my concern, then I'm happy to abdicate, but I would really like us to figure out a way to have a discussion and a plan and decide if it's something we really want to focus on as a board and pursue, and therefore make the accommodations we might need to make in order to request them. But
Trustee
I don't know
Barrett?
what's the appropriate place to do that.
When it says early education, isn't that referring to special ed?
That's
Isn't
what
this
I-
whole page
that's what
referring
I
to
think.
special ed?
Yes.
That's
I-
my concern was.
Right, I believe it's inclusive special education for early childhood.
Right.
Like,
So
or
like-
special ed preschools?
Yes.
Right.
Or preschool slots?
Right.
Yep.
Okay, Trustee Barrett, did you have another comment? No. So, this is just discussion only, we don't need to take
Right.
action on it. So
Right.
Penny, I think you're staying up there, though,
I think so.
as we move to the budget reduction update.
So we have included the materials in this packet that we included last time. There were two additional ideas that were presented. One was contract or allow other school districts to purchase our services for transportation, for mechanic services and that
Oh,
sort
I
of
was gonna say,
thing.
we don't have
Again,
anything
these are
to
just
spare.
like two additional ideas on there. And the other one was to move the technology department to the warehouse and create space there. So those were just, I'm only pointing those out, that they were two ideas that came in addition to what you saw at the last meeting. So just remember that at our July, I'm thinking it's summer already. At our January 31st budget board meeting, our special meeting, the board will have opportunity to have deep discussion around ideas. And we'll come to the board with a longer list than $400,000, because that was the request at the last meeting. For consideration, we've had leadership look at this list and do some prioritization. DAC will also look at the list. We'll get the list to you. It's not quite ready yet, though, before the next DAC meeting. You can add things to it, take things off. We plan to handle the process much like we have done with the strategic plan additions. So this is just on there again for your information. If there's anything that you feel like we need to add to the big list, let us know. And then we'll be doing some harder, deeper work at the January 31st special board meeting.
So this is really just to add, this is not like a long discussion. But I see Trustee Van Sant, you have a comment? Okay.
Just so I understand, you have not, when we've worked with it in the past, we end up with this little like chart where we see what your leadership team scored it, or sort of, that's not here with us.
That's not here with us yet.
But you still intend to do that?
We do intend to do that.
So I guess I mean, maybe this is the language you've used in the past, but I'm asking to emphasize it this year. I am interested in exploring where our money, not because we have to save money, even though I know that's in people's minds, but not in mine right now. The question, I'm hoping the question can be, which of these do we think are having the least impact on achievement or school climate or whatever our core areas of concern are? So I kind of don't want it to be a popularity contest, or which is often how we, I like that program, but really, really clear on, is this program doing, yeah. Is it really truly linked to achievement? Because I'm interested in beginning the discussions of how we shift money to make sure we're accomplishing our goals. If maybe we're not cutting money, but we may need to shift it. So that's what I was just hoping.
Great. And we will only be looking at the general fund expenditures, and in February, we start the strategic planning process. So the things that are on.
You're not asking them to look at the supplemental concentration grant funds too?
We hadn't planned to do that at the January workshop. We could. I mean, we are having a board workshop with Steve Zweiback facilitating, talking about how we evaluate and what the board's role is in that process. So we hadn't talked about using that meeting for that, but we could.
What, I'm a little lost. Were we going to talk about general fund?
Yes.
But not supplemental concentration grant?
We hadn't planned on it, no.
Why?
Because at the time,
no,
until just yesterday, we had to cut $400,000 from our budget. And
From
so
general fund.
We've been focusing on that.
I'm just thinking that now maybe we should be shifting on all of our funds. Are we being where do we need to shift in order to make sure we're achieving our student achievement goals? And I guess I don't see why we would limit it to base grant at that time. But I don't want to take up too much time at the Steve Zweiback training, so I'll leave that to you guys to figure out.
Well, that's actually not the Steve Zweiback training, that's the 31st, right? The budget.
lost in my
Budget is
meetings.
the 31st.
The budget is the 31st.
We have a planning session for Steve Zweiback tomorrow. My comments were about that workshop, were based on comments that the board made at the last meeting around the board's role in setting the tone for our student achievement work, and how we're going to make sure that we're evaluating the programs that we have the most, the highest effect on kids. So I thought that's what we were doing with Steve. Typically, we haven't really started our strategic plan work until February. Although tonight we're sharing with the board which positions are funded. We hadn't planned to take action, but we could, you certainly could talk about it on January 31st. We won't be ready with stakeholders' opinions on those particular items if you're wanting them. We can't get that done by January 31st.
So I'm sorry to belabor the point. So then I guess I wasn't clear. I know things have changed. We thought we had to cut a number at 400,000. We still want to continue the discussion, but not necessarily with that as our agenda, cutting funds. But were you going to seek input from leadership on just base grant funding, or on both?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I missed that part.
Yes.
I thought you would be seeking feedback on the whole range of what we have.
We eventually will, but we haven't done that with them yet.
So did you think the 400,000 reduction had to come from base grant?
It does.
It does, so that's why you were just focusing on base grant, because
Correct.
that's where the reduction had to be.
That's the structural deficit.
Well, we feel like we still are going to have to make some reductions in the long run, likely.
Yes.
So
Yes.
we really, and maybe it's not $400,000, but when you look at the multi-year
Multi-year.
projection, and, we're getting $3 million next year, and then we're getting $1 million, that we won't sustain that with the fair share agreement increases that we'll be giving next year, and over the multi-year. So it's likely we're going to have to make reductions. We'd rather identify, there were a lot of really great ideas that came forward, I think that have some validity. And so we think we should think of that, we should think of those ideas still and do what we can do to make sure that we're super efficient in our budget. But we have not had leadership. We could talk with leadership next week about supplemental concentration grant funded positions and get their opinions. My instinct tells me they won't want to reduce any of those positions, or very few. So we have had some discussion with leadership about abandoning things too early. We don't know that we have good data yet to be able to say this strategy is not working. So I don't know that that we'll be ready to make a recommendation to the board that we eliminate. I'm just going to use this as an example. I'm not suggesting this at all, but that we, for example, eliminate reading teachers next year. I don't think although our reading scores, we've seen very little increase, we're not ready to abandon that strategy yet. And I would think that leadership would agree with that, I mean, just based on our discussions. So there might be a couple of things in there, but I don't think we're going to be ready to I don't think our stakeholders, we did not plan to have DAC prioritize things next week for potential supplemental concentration grant funded program eliminations. So if the board wants us to do that, you should let us know, because we're not ready for that. But we can be, we'll just change.
Trustee Arkin?
You know, I would like to get a sense of it, not an absolute like what we're talking about. Yes, I'm ready to eliminate this, and that, but just get a sense of how they're feeling about certain programs that you're saying that you're sure that they wouldn't want to do certain things, but they might have an idea of something that might not be working. And it'd be nice for us to start kind of thinking along those terms. And just to let us know kind of what they're thinking, or for them to realize that we're thinking along those terms and maybe we need to stop thinking that.
Trustee Nelson?
I want to propose something. We're going to have a short amount of time on the 31st to discuss the topics that have been planned for. And if we rush, part of the idea of the meeting on the 31st is the educating ourselves on how to be more effective board members.
No, that's not the 31st.
That's for later. That's the
31st is just
I'm mixed up in a meeting. The 31st is not Steve's buyback?
No,
board workshop. Sorry, special meeting for budget.
31st is money.
Yeah.
Okay. I was with you, Tyler, I was confused. I thought we were combining the same meeting.
He was not available on that date,
Okay.
and we thought it was more important to change the date and have him.
Okay.
So 31st is budget, and then February 6th is.
I guess my point still, what I'd like to propose to you guys is the meeting has started to be prepared for talking about general funds. Can we focus on general funds? And then when LCFF budget topics come on, then we can focus on those and just keep them separate. I understand the sense of urgency, but I'm just wondering, it seems like it might be a good course.
Trustee Van Sant?
I'm fine with that. I just wanted to, I just wanted to make sure that we were giving clear direction to Deb so we were all on the same page. I guess I had missed, I hadn't realized that we were only focusing on general fund, because the input from leadership and from DAC, particularly if they're looking around effectiveness of funds, not cutting funds, is really important to me. And so I felt like we need that input when we're going to be making the decisions around supplemental and concentration grant. And I'm not imagining we're going to eliminate programs, but if we need to shift the way funds are used to maximize, I'm open to that. And I'll use one that's less sort of alarming than eliminate all the reading teachers, but we put 2 hours of extra paraprofessional time into TKK. I'm curious to know whether the kindergarten and TK teachers feel like that's the best use of funds, or is there another way we can support their programs, TK and K, maybe with that same amount of money in a different way? So that's the kind of input I'm hoping we'll have, so I was letting you know that, because I don't want us making those decisions, I want it to be well-informed.
But not by the 31st.
Whatever timeline you work out is fine,
So
whatever makes sense.
the 31st will be on general fund.
So it sounds like the 31st, we're going to go through the exercise of cutting money, as if we maybe had to. And then we'll still have input from leadership and others on the supplemental concentration grant fund at another time.
Through the LCFF process, correct?
Yeah, but we will have to, in the past, when we've talked about these positions, we've gotten direction from the board that we would likely continue them because we have a March 15th deadline. If
Right.
we're going to lay off if we're going to eliminate any programs that involve certificated staff, we have to do that no later than the March 9th board meeting. So we really need to do that in February.
So that's layoffs, though. If we change assignments a little bit, is that a problem? I'll give an example. I'm just going to go for it.
Yeah.
If we decide that the GATE program doesn't need a full-time person but could use a half-time person, do we have to do something by March 15th, or is that an adjustment we can make after that?
So that's on the list of reduction ideas because there's some ideas connected with the MESA program. So we're going to be talking about that.
Well,
on-
pretend it was a good example.
If we reconfigure a position and we add duties to it, it may be likely that we would need to eliminate that position, write a new job description, bring it
Okay.
forward to a different.
So
So
we-
we would
we
want to.
do need to do it by January. Okay.
Anything related to certificated staff, we'd want to do in February, and then classified, anything related to that, it's a 60-day notification. So do we want to do it by April?
Okay.
So.
So that is soon, if we wanted to modify positions, you think you're saying let's do it by February.
Trustee Montpere?
Well, just to tell you how much I agreed with Megan and thought that's what we were discussing, that was the basis of my column that's going in the journal next week. So you can answer the questions about how that's incorrect.
I think your column's fine. I read your
But
column, and
I
I
know,
think
but it
it's.
was referring to the board making decisions on January 31st or discussing the supplemental concentration grant.
I will
didn't
say,
get that
it
from
does
the
say
column.
right here, reduction of 400,000 from the general fund. If we had read this a little more closely, it does say.
And if it makes you feel better, Gail, I didn't read that into I read your article today. I
good.
did not read that into your article. I think, I thought it was
All
more
right,
of a
that
global.
Yeah, all right.
I would add that the budget reduction prioritization is important. If at whatever point it's necessary, then we've done the work and we have a prioritization. There could be an economic downturn. We don't know what might be in the future, so. And we know that the pension costs are going up. Next year will be more funding than pension cost increases. The next 2 years look to be less, so.
Are there any more comments? Are we, no actions needed on this? Are we fine to move on? Yeah, okay. So approve the use of one-time money. Penny, I think you're just standing right there.
Yes. Ian, we have, is there an attachment to that? There should be.
Yeah.
Good.
I may not have given
No,
it to
it
you
is.
separately.
It's on there.
Yeah,
Keep going down, Ian.
right there.
Yep.
Use of one-time money. Uh-huh. Oh, it's,
So while they're trying to get that up, I'll do a quick introduction. At our December meeting, Penny presented the first interim report, and with that, she talked about the use of one-time money and talked about approval of that. And there was some confusion about whether or not the board approved that. So we're bringing that back to the board for discussion. The proposal, this is not the new one-time money that we hope to receive next year. This is this year's one-time money. We are proposing, and we did talk with leadership about this, that it be used on textbooks because we have a shortfall in our textbook fund. for our textbook adoptions and facilities projects, the deferred maintenance plan. So that would be the proposal, and you all are very aware of all of our facilities needs. So that's what
So-
support was.
So from a review from the December board meeting, we looked at the one-time funds for this year. In October, on the consent agenda was an approval for the 2 new vans and 1 dump truck for $100,000 out of this year's one-time money, leaving a balance of the $721. Then we also have the excess technology infrastructure upgrade funds that we had set aside, and now we have less costs to complete that project. So there's over $500,000 of savings there, giving us that total almost $1.3 million. And then we looked at leadership's recommendation for the use with textbooks, the 3-year plan for textbooks needing $792,000. And then facilities deferred maintenance, adding $500,000 to that. So what seemed to possibly be confusing was the fact that we had some approval on consent agenda, and then we had this approval within the first interim budget report. So what I was going to propose was that in the future, when we approve one-time money, we have it as a separate action item, so then it's clear to everyone exactly what's being approved and for the board and all of our stakeholders. So that was my thought on that, because it did seem to be a little confusing.
Questions, comments? Thank you for bringing it back, Penny. I
Sure.
appreciate that.
Okay.
I guess I have one question.
Trustee Montpere?
Not to raise my favorite issue, but, so the last suggestion for one-time funds or previous ones, and I went through my past files and found them. What had been added were the artificial fields, and we had long discussions about, you felt that was a community interest. So I guess, and I see that's not on here anymore, so I'm assuming that administration did not share that.
No, it just was not, those are just 2 items that were,
Suggested.
and a turf exceeds that amount that we have.
I know, but
It
it
still
always exceeded
is.
the amount we had.
I know, it still is an issue in the district, and it still is certainly something that, administration, it's something we have to address in the future. But right now, I think that what leadership talked about was textbooks and deferred maintenance facilities projects are the priority in that one-time money.
And I guess I'm just trying to get to my question. My question was, when I went back and looked at all the previous suggestions, there were the textbooks and there were various other things, but the artificial turf fields were never in that list. And so I was just curious how we decide what makes it onto this list and how something could get put on that was not included in previous lists. It's just a question of transparency.
In the past, there had been just suggestions of needs, and one of those was that the community had voiced interest in the artificial turf field, so we had cost that out, and that was just noted as a potential need, it was never board approved.
Yeah.
And another potential need that I listed was that HVAC central plant unit at Grace Hudson, just for some of the outstanding one-time needs of the district.
Some examples.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. So are we going to reapprove this? Is there a motion to approve the official approval of these one-time monies?
I will move approval, and I appreciate that in the future, it'll come back in a different format. I think I would have had more problems with this if we didn't suddenly have a lot more money. So I do appreciate that there'll be more clarity in the future.
Is there a second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
And Katie, you are up.
Budget Development Supplemental and Concentration Grant Funded Positions.
I don't think I need these boxes here, but we're good. Good evening. What we have put together are all the positions that are within the strategic plan that are full positions. So it doesn't include things like the additional few days that we added on to the health assistants or changing a dean to an assistant principal, those kinds of things. They're just positions that are full positions that are within the supplemental and concentration grant through the strategic plan. And so we wanted to present this to you, and as Superintendent Cuban had said, we do need to make decisions by the February board meeting on the certificated positions. So we've given you the information, and we tried to get, what sites they're at. There are a few positions that are at various sites. I didn't get all the detail on the, paraprofessionals, but those are at elementary sites. And if you have any questions on these positions and this information.
Trustee Van Zandt?
Just a quick question. The daycare staff for YPP, is that the same one we're talking about in another minute? Okay.
Correct.
Trustee Nelson?
A rookie question, I'm sorry. One FTE is a full-time position?
A full-time equivalent, yes.
And so for the reading teachers, what's the story with the, just curious, two at Calpella and two at Grace Hudson and one everywhere else?
So prior to us having supplemental and concentration grant funds, there was a big push in the district to provide RTI, response to intervention support. And that support was given to sites through a combination of Title I funds and special ed support in the hopes of RTI preventing students from being identified for special ed. So the first school, Grace Hudson, did not have that additional support because they had so few special ed students compared to the other districts, so the FTEs didn't work out to have them have that additional. So when we were looking at providing reading teachers so that we could have a little more equity across schools, we added an additional supplemental concentration grant reading teacher. Calpella started with just one, but then Calpella's is different because as special ed numbers, caseloads changed, Calpella had to lose a whole FTE, and that reduced their ability to provide their RTI schedule for reading. And so last year it was decided we had an FTE, 2 FTE reading teachers allocated at Pomalita Middle School, but they realized they wanted to start with 1, and so we that site graciously said, yes, let's put that back down into the elementaries. So that's why those 2 numbers are different.
And I wish I would have thought about this earlier, but are the reading levels of those 2 schools with the 2 FTE are the scores any better than the schools with 1 FTE? Are we seeing a difference because they have extra reading teachers?
It's actually kind of just
equivalent.
It's made them equivalent so that they have the similar amount of support.
It's funded elsewhere, so like they all have 2.
Got it.
But some are funded out of Title I and partially funded out of special education.
And that's why they're not here?
Yeah.
So that's why it looks weird.
So the support is the same, it's just the funding is different.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Trustee Barrett?
I'd just like to say thank you for putting this together, because it was just really good to see where our supplemental concentration funds go exactly, and that, I think that will help us think about decisions.
Good. And it's good to see where they're at, what sites, because it's hard to look at it in the bigger document.
Trustee Monpere? Trustee Monpere?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay. No other comments? No action was needed. So next we have a Resolution 12 for the establishment of a pupil transportation equipment fund. Penny's back.
So this was attached in your packet already, and so if there are any questions.
This basically just opens a new fund, and it will help us not inflate our reserve amount that's based on expenses when we purchase our new electric buses at 1.2 million that we were fully funded with the grant for. And then certain expense costs are based on the amount of expenses in our general fund, and so it'll keep that expense down as well. It's just a strategy to save us some money, and after this year, we can close the fund.
Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Next is the annual and 5-year accounting of developer fees for the fiscal year 16-17.
So Government Code 66006 requires school districts to provide information both annually and every 5 years regarding the collection of developer fees. All information being provided was made available to the public and the board as required. The board's required to review and adopt these findings. Now, I can either go through them or...
Are there any questions from the board?
No.
So
Is there a motion to approve the annual information and findings?
I so move.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Resolution 10, elimination of classified position.
Katie, you want to do this?
So as was discussed earlier, in the strategic plan, we have the position to provide childcare for our young parent program. And currently, we do not have any children in the program. And it's been like that for a while, and we do not expect to have any children in the next couple months. So we're proposing to reduce that position, and we would have 60 days to reduce the position, and then if we needed to bring it back, we would have time to be able to do that. But
Yep.
currently, we do not expect any students.
We'll give the
children.
notice right away. The employee will still be employed for the next 60 days. So that's why it's important to do these, because for classified employees, the notice period is 60 days. And so if we do have babies who need to be served through the young parent program, we would bring this position back. But we currently do not have a need.
Trustee Mompere?
I don't know where I read this was at South Valley.
Well, the young parent program is served through the South Valley Administration. The program is actually on the high school campus.
Okay, so that's the program we visited,
Yes,
obviously.
exactly.
So what happened to the baby that was there?
I don't know.
I think there were alternative childcare arrangements.
And it could be as they age out, then they usually.
No, this baby.
This was a baby.
Oh, okay.
That baby has alternative childcare.
I know, because I wanted to hold her.
I'm
Wouldn't
sure
let
you
me.
did.
Trustee Van Sant?
So does that mean there are no young parents?
No, it just means that there are no infants.
Children needing care?
Correct.
How many young parents are there?
That, I was asking that today. I could not get that number, so I can find that out and I'll get that to Deb.
I want to say like 4 or
Yeah,
something
it's
like
about
that
right.
sticks in my head. We just
Oh,
visited
we
there.
went there.
So
Okay.
I think it's about 4.
Okay. I was afraid there was nobody there at all, and I was going to say, well,
Yeah.
let's make sure.
We
that-
have students, not infants.
Okay.
Right, currently.
Trustee Delson?
I am sorry to lose a position because I know it's somebody's income. I am very glad we don't have babies. That is nice. I would move that we approve resolution number 10. Elimination of classified position.
Trustee Mompere, do you have a comment? No? Is there a second?
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. moving to the strategic plan mid-year progress report.
While Katie is getting her stuff, she's just going to hit a couple of highlights. You've had the document to review. I'm really proud to say that we only have one red on that document. We have 100 and some odd actions in our strategic plan, and there's only one that we have not yet started, and we think it was supposed to be eliminated anyway. But that's really good. The staff is working super hard. Katie's going to hit a couple of the highlights of things we're especially proud of, and then talk about a couple of focus areas.
So some of the highlights, we're really excited. We've been working on our ELA pilot in grades K through 8, and our teachers have all met and have unanimously approved the pilot, so we'll be bringing that to you at the February board meeting. We've also just started our small group reading instruction training, and we've got really good positive feedback about the training, so we're really excited as we get ready for our ELA adoption. Another thing is our summer programs, and I know we reported this again, but our summer academy was very successful at the high school at the first 2 weeks in August, and they are gearing up for their mid-year trip where they are, for students that have kept their, 9th grade students who've kept their GPA above a 3.0, they're going to do an extra field trip, and they're looking at going to Santa Cruz. That was the idea that they had done last year. So we're getting ready, actually. We have our first summer school meeting next week, so we're excited to look at programs for the summer. Our music program is flourishing. I know many of you went to our programs around the holidays. Space is continuing, and we're just starting the spring semester with Oak Manor, Ukiah, and Eagle Peak, and that's exciting, and my son is participating in that, so that's fun to hear how that's going. We also, again, we've opened the STEM Magnet School. The school was open before, but we started the program, and that's been a great effort by a lot of teachers and staff. The other highlight is we're really moving forward on the middle college, which has been a long process to get going, but we're really excited about next year. As you know, we've signed the MOU, and now we are accepting applications. We'll be having a communication going out I think next week, recruiting more students. So we're really excited about that collaboration with the college, and it's been a great collaboration. And I really want to thank Holly and Ureli on all their work with the middle college. Another big thing is our technology is going well. We see more implementation with technology. Teachers are getting very comfortable in using it adeptly. And we're also looking at with staff, currently most staff have a non-Chromebook computer, and we're looking at piloting some Chromebooks with staff that are a little more high-end Chromebooks. So we'll see, but much cheaper than a regular laptop. So looking at ways to potentially reduce costs there. Our WebLink program, started our school year off, and we now have teachers that are going to be going to do some more further work on getting trained for WebLink. So that's always exciting to see. Let's see, what else? Oh, we had great success with our parent liaisons this year and really helping reach out to our parents and get those forms turned in for our free and reduced, which has really helped our unduplicated pupil count. But in addition, they've been great resources in getting our parents online with our new Aries online system. They have worked really hard on that, and we're now starting our online enrollment process. And just those types of parent contacts are amazing. The parent engagement, last Wednesday, we had our second parent engagement with our college and career success group that's been coming up. We have another one next Wednesday, and we're looking at that as our pilot, and we're excited with that. Another really fun thing with parent engagement this year, I just was thinking about something that's expanded because people have seen what a great thing it is the barn dance. So Ukiah has traditionally done a week of instruction of square dancing, and then they have a big barn dance. And Calpella decided to do that this year as well because it's so popular, lots of folks there. I went to the Ukiah one, it was really fun, and Calpella did an extravaganza getting ready for the holidays and barn dance at Eagle Peak because it was such a big production, and they said they had a great time and lots of parent engagement. Also, we've really worked on increasing our counseling services. We have some of the counselors have really been able to work with our students, and I know Jason will talk a lot more about that. And then in our career technical ed, we've really outlined our pathways. There's always some things changing in CTE, which makes us have to change our pathways slightly, or at least our coding. But we've really got those pathways down. And when Dan was presenting the 3 STEM pathways at the school, when we were looking at those, we were thinking, what are those pathways that they can do at Eagle Peak that will directly go into pathways at the high school? And when we looked at those, it's really amazing. Their handbook is online. You should, if you've not had their looked at their course handbook, they've really outlined the pathways for CTE in that handbook for students as well. Jason, I know, will talk a lot more about PBIS. And then facilities, we know we have lots of work to do with our facilities, but we're excited, especially with the campus beautification that is in the works at Pomalita and then at the high school through the DROPS grant. So we've been very busy. We're really excited with that. The one red item that is on page 32, and we were pretty sure we had recommended removing that, and I think we just did not do that. But it's work with MCOE to possibly implement alternative school programs for elementary students who've committed expellable offenses. We have, Jason has worked with Chris Francis. We really don't see that happening right now. We just don't have enough students, knock on wood, for that. But we have looked at developing some other programs that would help support students. So we would like to recommend to remove that from our plan. And some things that we are continuing to work on, the tutoring with the foster youth, where we set up the MOU with Tapestry, has been a little slow. We're just working on getting those referrals from the other agencies. So that's been a little bit slower than what we wanted, but everything's in the works. It's just moving slower than we expected. So those are some of the highlights. And Deb, I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to add.
No, I just add one more thing. We continue to struggle a bit with assessments, and we're still, we're still working on that system. And I think I've shared with the board before, I emailed a lot of my colleagues to say who's doing this really well, and they all emailed back and said, let us know what you find out from other people. So next week when I'm at our annual superintendent's conference, I'm going to be looking for that and looking for districts that are implementing an assessment system really well, because we struggle.
Thank you, Katie. Yeah. Trustee Arkin?
Oh, sorry.
Did you mention a middle college teacher yet?
Yes, we have.
We do have.
We have one.
And who is that?
So Evan Willig, who currently teaches at South Valley, he's going to be the middle college teacher, and he'll teach math and PE. And then we have a position posted on EdJoin for the other teacher, because we'll have 2 teachers the first year.
Trustee Montpere?
Oh, my God. On the assessment, this is not the right time, but at some point I would love to see a brief presentation on what assessments we are using, and never mind, I'll just go talk to Kate.
Trustee Van Sant?
I have a question about page 26, and I should have asked it ahead of time, so you may not know the answer, and that's okay. The board, let's see, foster youth support, the board allocated funds so that teachers and counselors and principals could attend after-school multi-agency foster youth meetings. Is that happening? Is that coordination with really County Department of Social Services happening, and are school staff able to attend those meetings? So you may not know the answer. I forgot to ask.
Yeah, I don't have all the detail on it, but we have put the information out that the funding's there, so I can go back and get some more info on that for you.
Okay. Then to Deb, I was a little worried about this when we set funding aside, because I think it's so important, and I also knew that it was going to be more than just making the funding available, but somebody's going to have to be looking out for this. So if that's not happening, that's just something I'd like to consider for making sure happens in our strategic plan. It concerned me that nobody was assigned to make that happen, because there's some coordination in finding out when those meetings are and who's supposed to be invited, and making sure you're invited to them. And I would be disappointed if that's not happening because we didn't identify a person to make sure it was happening.
Is the person responsible not listed?
I don't know if who was ever supposed to be. I mean, I don't want to put anyone on the spot. I don't know if anyone was ever supposed to be responsible.
I'm just saying in the document, is it listed who's responsible?
No, the task was to put the funding available. It wasn't make somebody coordinate it.
Well, yeah, we intend to coordinate it. So
Right.
We probably should have written that differently, because that's, can you come up to the microphone?
So during that presentation, Heather had introduced that idea with DESA West and what was happening with special ed kids specifically. So she was praising that DESA had been doing that with some of the kids who come to those meetings. So many of those meetings in regard to special ed and stuff are also still happening. They're happening during school hours. That's just for additional funding if it's going to be for after school. So some of that is still taking place. Those things are happening. It's just whether or not they have to happen in an after-school setting, and especially in regard to special ed kids. So, I mean, obviously that's something we're still looking forward to, and obviously trying to make sure that we have people there. But oftentimes those can happen during school hours, during school time, or that a special ed teacher has an additional prep or those things happening. It's not to say they aren't happening.
Okay, my interest at the time was not just the special ed kids. I think it was specific, right? So that's why I assumed it would have to be after school, because I didn't know if there was a classroom teacher that was going to be leaving the classroom to attend one of those meetings. So that was my assumption. Okay. And I just do want to make it clear that since I do work for the County of Mendocino, coordinating anything with it's really difficult. And I would anticipate that it would be a two-way street that would involve coordination on both sides. So.
Okay, any more comments? No? So we made Jason stay till nearly the end for the drug and violence prevention presentation. Thank you for hanging in there. Thank you, Katie, for your work.
Just a quick little introduction. I think at our last, maybe the November board meeting, we were talking briefly about some of the things that we're seeing in our schools this year and actually the past 2 years. So we wanted to give the board an update on where we are with incidents around drug offenses and fighting on campus, and then what we're doing about it.
Okay, so as we get started, everybody's had such positive news today, and of course, we have me.
This is positive.
This is the part I wanted to start with, some of the positive things, because I think as we talk about what has gone on with some of these issues, it's incredibly disheartening. I mean, to see some of these numbers go up because they're kids, and I also know the strides that staff has made, all the time they're spending trying to make these things better. And we also want to highlight some of the good things that are happening, because when we look at, we call this classroom behaviors, but really much of this is behaviors of interaction between our adults on campus and staff and students. And much of what we're doing with PBS and some of these things, if you look, we are actually having one of the best years we've ever had with some of these things with school violations and defiance and disruptive. And so many of those classroom type behaviors are interactive behaviors that we have going on between students and staff. So just to remind everybody quickly, some of the things that we have done with teachers and staff as we go through, because I'll be building off of this as well as we talk about how we respond, is that we certainly have trained staff on, trauma-informed practices, PBS basics. Obviously, I'm going a little quickly. I can talk, obviously, at length about any of these things. Social emotional behavior and learning, restorative concepts, mindfulness, and get curious, not furious. These are some of the trainings we have had of late, especially at the beginning of the year, and then also talk about some of the expansions we've had. So as we look through, like I said, many of these things have gotten much better. We've seen some really positive steps in these statistics. And much of what we're seeing and why we're seeing those things, and some of these things, as you looked, we've had some drastic differences, is that first, also, Chris, your position certainly has helped out. I don't know if all of you guys have met. I know he came one time, but I just want to reintroduce. This is Chris Kinney. So one of the things that we're doing, and also as we respond to these things, is we now, through the grant that we got last year, is we have basically a full-time person working with sites on PBIS and working through district-wide. And so it's been extremely helpful in doing that. Also, it's allowed us the time to get creative with some of the new positions and things that we're doing. So, as we're going through and we're seeing more benefits, and also I'll be talking about some of these things later, is we're getting more targeted in things like our check-in, check-out system. We look at chronically absent kids. We actually have groups going for check-in, check-out for fire victims. We also have check-in, check-out going for students that we see having disruptive behaviors. Some of the other pieces we've seen that I think are really cool that I think you guys would like to know about also as we go through this, and it'll also help out when we look at these extreme behaviors, is that Chris is building early warning systems at each and every site to try to make sure we don't have kids falling through the cracks. And so what some of those early warning systems look like in areas is that, let's give high school, for example, is that it would have everything from a student's grades, attendance, even being updated when we have progress reports coming out. All those sort of behaviors. And what it does is it gives us hot lists. And if you're assistant principal, a counselor, even Jacob, or the meetings we have with the team I have now, we're looking through and we quickly can identify those students. So we have fewer kids falling through the cracks, especially at those very large schools. Even our smallest schools have 450 plus kids. So as we're using preventative measures again for the at-risk kids, again, we're getting more creative with check-in and check-out. We're continuing to refine our messages to students, sharing strategies across schools. Some of you guys had asked about that. Some of those things would be things like, we have a coordinators meeting and have had for the last 4+ years where the coordinators of PBS come together every single month. Not only are they having visits, obviously, from Chris on a weekly basis, but we also have our consultant comes monthly or bi-monthly, working with those things. And then we have a monthly meeting that takes place where we're going through and obviously talking about strategies. So we're continuing also to add positive incentives for students for socialization and role modeling. One of the big things is that Palmalita is up and going. They even have a student store now. And so their system is, if you drive by, you're seeing their signage, you're seeing the store, and you're seeing those things happening as well. So let's talk about the part that we're most concerned about. So in the last 2 years, because I'm including this year, the first semester, we're seeing a rise in very serious behaviors. It's incredibly disheartening because this represents students and this represents staff and what's going on in students' lives. And so, we saw a big rise in assaultive behavior. Threats to other students is down considerably this year. A lot of that is also we're trying to obviously, and we always do, counsel kids as quickly as possible. Weapons possessions, again, is up. Drug possessions, as you see, really has gone up tremendously. We were running into the 30s. We jump up to 73. We're at 45 so far this year. Drug usage, also we've seen that as well. Destruction of property, threatening to fight, fighting, battery. It's still very high this year, as we saw before, and things like sexual harassment. We did not include some of the smaller stats just simply because otherwise this presentation gets massive. We also saw rises in things of like racial slurs and those sort of things as well. So as we look at all those things, obviously we're continuing to try to refine PBIS, but that's not the only thing that affects our kids and what's happening. So we saw, here's some of the other things that we're dealing with at school and dealing with is a political climate. where last year's elections, and it's continued, where we're constantly seeing people talking about immigration and race and all these things, and oftentimes very concerning things to our students that create a lot of angst in their lives, also creating conflict that's being reinforced, obviously, every day on TV that they're seeing, that makes it very tough. We also see increased violence in the community. We obviously had a shooting this year. We also had a shooting last year that involved our students last year and this year, and some increased gang activity.
But not in our schools.
It was not in our school, thank you. But they did involve, obviously, students within our community. Thank you. It's getting late. My apologies if that was not clear. But again, they affect our students, and they affect our students tremendously. There's always such a trickle-down effect. We also had another incident here on Orchard, as you know, where students were found with guns as well. Our officers obviously help respond to those things, and we deal with those things every day. Also, the changing attitudes with marijuana and the legislation, certainly we have seen a huge impact on our community as well. This year, you know, adding to the situation also is the trauma with fire, and certainly the concerns and what was happening. Also, the issue with the fire also meant at times that a lot of the things we started and resources we had going other places, and with students, we obviously shifted. You know, a position that we created at the district, I don't know what we would have done without Veronica Tenejero, who obviously was our district liaison, who was working tremendously, obviously, on some of the other initiatives, and we shifted her to help her out in some of these places. Places like Calpella were down, their PBS coordinator, their counselor, obviously school staff, and then dealing with these things and trying to shift people to help out at all these sites and what's going on. As we also know, we also are dealing with a population of students, and I've talked to you about before, that are very high at risk. The ACEs scores, we are one of the highest in the state of California and have continued to be. Which also means when we have some of these things take place, we have kids already at the tipping point. So oftentimes it doesn't take a whole lot more to tip over the situations and what we do with them. The important things is that what are we doing and how are we going to try to make it better, and what are we doing as a community? So some of the things that we're looking at and we're refining are things like our gang prevention. In 5th grade, we are completely redoing what we've done with gang prevention and some of the other activities that went along with it. So Vicente Duarte, myself, Chris, Isabel Madrigal, our officer, and Eddie Vidola, we have been working on completely changing sort of the GRIP presentation. So when we did that, we had some pieces in mind. We took a lot of feedback from what we heard from teachers and staff. We also kept some other pieces in mind that we wanted to build off what already exists at schools, which is their PBIS systems, which is what's going on in classrooms and how kids are being taught of doing activities and collaborative work and those sort of pieces as we make presentations. We also wanted to create an efficiency because we were hearing from teachers concerns that much of what was being presented was redundant because with PBS and some of these things, they were already dealing with these issues. When we're talking about the 5th grade, the concern also becomes is that 5th grade, there already is so many things that take students away from the class stuff and concerns over test scores and things and how much they're out. So in trying to redo the program, what we have done is that we've set up a program built around using a collaborative process where the first time we'll be making 14 90-minute presentations in specific classrooms around the district to start out with. It's going to look very different. You know, every 15 minutes or so, kids will be talking about those things and doing a project as we present to them in a much more collaborative fashion. We also are building around the ideas that are already implemented through PBS, in that we start off with a question of what do you want your ideal community to look like, and some of the things that are already talked about in PBIS at schools. And then we're building from that as we go through and we talk about gangs and we talk about positive alternatives to those things. And we also are talking about some of the things that you want to see within your community and what that looks like, and again, building off those things. And then as part of the activities, we're also looking at things like the pillars and ideas that are built at each one of those things and what is trying to be promoted at those schools, and we tie those into their community. The follow-up also then becomes, if you want to add lessons and some of those other things for bullying and some of those things that we have at each and every site, it's going to allow us to add them in a much more efficient fashion, because The presentation will be slightly different at each one of the sites, because the nice piece now is I have Chris working with every site. He knows exactly the system that each site uses with their PBIS to be able to build within those things and to add on very quickly. So, for example, when we were giving these presentations before, one of the best, some of the things that were being presented were second step that we are already doing. For example, Stephanie was doing such a good job with that at Frank Zeke. It was just very redundant, many of the lessons. Obviously, many of you, I see lots of Grace Hudson parents, a few Ukiah and grandparents, obviously. You guys already know sort of what they're doing there. Again, we're building off what's already happening. In the middle school level, we have individualized counseling a lot more. We also have law enforcement working with individual gang members. Isabel Madrigal has been fantastic at the middle schools. I know some of you have been there, seen her working directly with kids. She also is going out, as is Officer Gray from the Sheriff's Department, and working individually with kids once a week, not just at Palmalita, but also at Eagle Peak. In the Sheriff's Department, like I said, we have an officer that has really ingratiated himself and done such a good job out there, Officer Gray, and working with students. Students are starting to feel very comfortable with Officer Madrigal and Officer Gray working with them. It's also building that sort of trusting relationship we want to see kids have moving forward with law enforcement and how they see law enforcement. And so that is starting to work and pay dividends, and we're seeing that as well. Also, they're doing check-in, check-out with kids. It's something that we said, hey, let's try, and we're getting some really positive results with kids, and they like it. Because I think sometimes we forget there are many gifted officers out there. Oftentimes officers are getting a very negative name when really when we're talking about kids who are dealing with angry, tough situations, when you have very empathetic police officers, they deal with it every single day. They're pretty good at some of these things, and it's going well. At the high school level, we're getting individualized counseling and counselors and law enforcement as well, but also we're having group presentations. So on their own, the high school, as we've gone out, is starting to put together a lot of things, and obviously I coordinate work with them, but I've been really happy. Jen Julius and Consenia from the Youth Project have spearheaded presentations going with gang presentation with Martin Perez from probation. They also are giving hour-long presentations as well in regard to drugs. Some of the updated information that I've given you at times, they're taking that even to another step. They're going to PE classes. So basically all freshmen and sophomores are getting that as well. So we're hoping that pays dividends. Again, we're getting into more and more classrooms at different levels to try to deal with some of those issues. So questions we have from the board about some of those things and how we're going to deal with them as well. B?
So is this are you taking over the GRIP program this way?
So we have basically taken on the GRIP program ourselves. There were some concerns over, and I don't want to say anything bad about the GRIP program. I was incredibly appreciative. Chief Dewey still is giving us asset forfeiture money to help do those things. I think that much of the information was very outdated we were hearing. So we try to respond to what we're hearing from teachers and obviously kids, and trying to also make the presentation much more localized. So if you see the presentation, it's focusing on the gang issues we have here. Some of the videos and things that are being used in the past still had Crips and Bloods and all these different things that are not pertinent to our community. And so also we wanted to use people within our community, like Vicente and obviously Officer Madrigal. Also, the nice piece is, too, is at times those are the same people then offering those things at night and with questioning as well for parents.
Well, I like the way you're individualizing it. It really makes a big difference. You don't want to do repeat.
Yeah, and we also, like I said, are trying to look at how we build more efficiently and build within the systems we already have, because we have a lot of pre-existing systems.
Trustee Montpere?
Do we have a formal anti-bullying program at the elementary school?
We have an embedded anti-bullying because one of the things, in fact, I was just addressing the counselors last week about the issue of bullying and how we deal with things is that, we deal with harassment and we deal with all the pieces within of bullying, and then we also have second step curriculum for those things and teaching kids how to do those things, so much more embedded. Also, the other issue that we're constantly doing is looking at what we're doing We're looking at possibly next year, as you know, each year I try to bring something new to all the teachers and staff, and one of the things we're looking at is resiliency. Because what they're finding more and more is many of the programs are not necessarily hitting the mark they want, and the one program that seems kind of most important is that each of us learn as individuals resiliency. We have done that at specific schools, but maybe that gives us an idea and focus again for next year as some of the training, and so that's part of what we've been talking about as well.
Okay, thank you.
Trustee Van Sant?
Thank you. I'm encouraged to see the classroom behavior data. That's really good. I hope that that turns out the way we want it to, because that looks really good. I did have a question. When, in your experience, if I'm trying to project out 2017, 2018, is a semester about half? Or I
Yeah,
feel like
it's
you've told me.
it's about half.
It's usually sort of steady throughout the year?
Well, I would say if you want me to go through, I would say what we tend to see is classroom behaviors. I would say we'll probably get a higher number than we had first semester. And again, I'm just trying to be
Okay.
incredibly honest.
Kids get tired of behaving well, okay.
Teachers
So I'm
as
gonna-
well. Again, your husband's a teacher, let's be honest. With some of the more serious behaviors, oftentimes you do see a reduction. I think last year we saw some of those things pick up towards the end, and I was deeply concerned in seeing some of those things happening in the community.
So you can't always tell, it sounds like.
No, and I think what is concerning is that, you know, we've hit some perfect storms with some of these things that we have not seen in years, and then we hit it all in about an 18-month period. And it's really concerning, and obviously, we talk about it and close at different times and what some of those things lead to. But again...
Roughly half.
Yeah, roughly half. Oftentimes, though, with some of the more serious behaviors, we've dealt with some of those issues. We've dealt with some of the kids who are having some of those big issues. And unless we get those outside events, we typically do see those come down. I think that, like I said, because we've had some of those big events like shootings and different things, all of a sudden ramp those things up. We have seen sort of curves that, you know, normally I would say kind of high by November 15th. We oftentimes get those early in the year with conflicts and fighting and things, and then we've dealt with many of those things, and we start seeing a downturn. Like I said, because of the shooting and some of these other things, we've seen curves that we haven't necessarily seen trends that would be consistent of what we've seen in the past.
Okay, just one or two more questions. I appreciate all the things you guys are doing. It's really wonderful to see all the different efforts that are going into addressing this. Do you have a framework in mind on how you figure out what strategies, I mean, it sounds almost impossible, but what strategies are working and what are not? And just to add to that, I'm excited to hear you're focusing on resiliency. I think it's hard to evaluate whether you're getting the outcomes you want from the programs, and I hate to denigrate a program, but I have wondered whether mindfulness was actually reaching the goals that we had hoped for. So.
I think that mindfulness really is, because you're a Grace parent, has been huge at Grace. It's not necessarily as big everywhere else. Mindfulness, with Joanne Rosen obviously coming to Grace Hudson, that's where it's been used the most. We did bring mindfulness across the district as another strategy, again, for classroom behaviors and things, as one more piece. It's not necessarily the focus of all the rest of those pieces. Also, there's always an evolution at every school. I think the last person present, for example, was Dana Milani, I think was the last one who presented, and I was here. They're constantly adding. I think that, you know, she added Rachel's Challenge last year. I mean, it's an ongoing discussion. Also, with the coordinator positions and things, that's part of what that monthly meeting is looking at what those things are, talking. I'm talking with our Chris and our consultants, seeing what those things are, and then obviously talking with teachers as well, and, you know, administrators, campus supervisors, seeing what sort of piece each time. And as we've done those things, like I said, that's where we start bringing trauma in, or, you know, I'm going to other conferences and I come back and talk with everybody about, hey, which one do you think sort of fits where we're at? So we'll continue to try to look at those pieces as well.
Thank you.
Anything else? Other comments? Thank you very much, Jason.
Thank you for the report, Jason.
Okay. The contract for canine detective services, detection services.
The board asked at the last meeting that we bring a contract back for canine detection services for the remainder of the year. Tapping into what Jason talked about with our increase in especially drug-related suspensions or over the last 2 years, it is concerning, absolutely concerning. And so there's a contract attached. We do have canine detection with our school resource officer. We feel like we need to expand that. And since the last board meeting, Bugsy has been active. Bugsy the canine has been active. Since I did get the contract to bring forward, but since then, we've been talking with our local law enforcement agencies, and they are willing to help support this effort for no cost. And so what I'd like to have the board do is direct us to enter into an MOU with Mendocino County Sheriff's Department and UPD for enhanced detection services. And also at the same time, because I want to make sure that we're really consistent and that we're able to get the services that we need. So I'd like to try that for a couple of months, and if for some reason people are too busy or whatever, that we've got a backup plan with the agency that we could go with. So, but if we can do it for no cost and we get what we need, I think that's the most important part. I do have a short video if you want to watch it. It's about 5 minutes from InterQuest Canine Detection. It would give you kind of a big picture overview of how a canine detection program works. But if you want me to just hit a couple of high points, I can do that as well, just for time purposes.
Do you all want to see the video or just hit highlights?
Let me tell you, highlights, okay. So what we're looking for is we are looking at ongoing consistent implementation of canines across our secondary schools. So we'd be utilizing them in the middle schools and at both of our high schools, South Valley and Ukiah High School. And we would like for this to be a deterrent. We want to use this as a deterrent. My understanding is when the school resource officer program started with the drug dog, we saw a really large drop in drug-related incidents and suspensions. And over the past 2 years, it has increased. I don't think we've been utilizing the canine as consistently or frequently as we had in the past. So I'm looking forward to seeing what that consistent use would do. So we would utilize the canines, and the Sheriff's Department and UPD they've told us they could bring multiple. We would use them in locker areas, in student parking lots. They cannot detect on the street. The cars have to be parked in our parking lots, and also in classrooms. They cannot sniff people, but in my experience, what has happened in a program like this, and it sounds like the district used to utilize this as well, the administrator and the officer go into a classroom. The students leave the classroom with the teacher and step outside. The dog does its thing, and if a backpack is alerted on, the administrator at that point takes over and deals with that particular situation. Law enforcement is not dealing with that situation. Then it becomes an administrative search. So we'd like that to be implemented in that way with a collaboration with law enforcement. But it's important that we are consistent. You'll see in the contract what we talked with InterQuest Canine about was doing 2 days a month on average. They might come 3 one month and 1 the next, in all 4 of our secondary schools. We would certainly communicate widely and heavily about reminding people that we're using this strategy. And again, we've used it already. We have 1 canine with an officer, mostly at Ukiah High School. but we would communicate heavily because we want kids to not bring stuff to school. I mean, that's the point of having a program like this. So I'd like to recommend to the board that you direct us to enter into an MOU. We'd like to get started in February. I don't want this to take a long time. To me, it's an urgent issue, and so we'd like to get started in February, whichever way we go.
So we have public comment on this item, so if you have any clarifying questions before we do public comment, we do those now. Otherwise, if you want to hold off on your discussion until after public comment?
Yes.
Okay. So no clarifying questions?
No clarifying.
So Marissa Sizemore? So I will remind you, you have 5 minutes for your...
Good evening. As you know, I'm Marissa Sizemore, and I'm a speech-language pathologist here, and I work mostly at Ukiah High School. So at our school site council meeting yesterday, we had this conversation about this item on the agenda, and I felt very strongly about it, and so I wanted to come here and share with you. I feel like the use of canines in the classroom, as you were describing, is such a major disruption to teaching and learning, and it also brings upon the student this 30 other eyes, say they were alerted on, say their parents grow legally at their home, and then all of a sudden they're targeted in a way that is just super public, and maybe for the wrong reasons. I don't know how reliable these dogs are. I know they're probably pretty reliable, but I just want you to be I just want to say I'm concerned about it, and I hope that when you're making these decisions about how you move forward, that you're really thoughtful about what the intended purpose is of this program, which is a deterrent of bringing drugs on campus. We would all agree we don't want that to happen. But the actual effect of the program on students and on teachers and on the environment of the campus and all of the things that Jason was talking about, I really feel like have such a positive impact, and this just feels so negative, potentially really negative to me, that I just wanted to share that concern with all of you. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Comments and questions? Trustee Arkin?
I was also at the meeting with Marissa. I was just going to respond there was another parent there who also felt very strongly, and I just thought I would throw out part of what she was talking about is exactly what that parent felt. And if it got scary for kids and teachers, I think that would be a wrong way to go, but I really feel that what you're talking about, Deb, if you first do the other dogs with the canines, with Dewey and the sheriff, that if their intensity, the way they do it, does not work, and we're having more problems, I think I'm comfortable enough to go further if it looks like we need to go further. And so as long as we know that that's not what we're going to do at the beginning, but only if it's getting bad, so we need to go in that direction, then I'm okay. And I'm assuming you guys are going to be careful to monitor that kind of stuff. Yeah.
And Deb, this would also include the assemblies. Would we do the assemblies that InterQuest would do?
We absolutely could. We would have, if we used law enforcement, we'd have them come in and demonstrate to the kids, especially the middle school kids, how it works. The high school, they've met Bugsy, they've seen Bugsy working a little bit, certainly not in their classrooms recently, but so we'd probably want to do something there too, just brief though, because the dog is on that campus already.
Trustee Van Sant?
Thank you, and I guess I have a different viewpoint, and I don't support waiting and having law enforcement do this for a couple months to try it out, to see if it works. I would like to make a motion that we approve the contract with InterQuest, and if law enforcement can support that work, that would be great too. I want to respect Ms. Sizemore. I understand your position, but from my position, when I look at some of the behaviors that Mr. Iverson has shared, we're on track to have 90 drug possession offenses this year, which is 3 times as much as it was 3 years ago. And for me, I can't handle expelling kids anymore for this. It's breaking my heart. And if we can have a dog on campus that reminds a kid that bringing drugs to school was a terrible idea, and they think about that, to me, that is really a really good outcome. Because we have children that are not getting the message, and maybe through thinking a dog might show up, they might realize that leaving their marijuana at home is a good idea. And so we are not in the position of having to expel kids for this, which is a terrible outcome for all of us. It's a terrible outcome for the child. It's a terrible outcome for all of the students and all of the adults that have been working with that child. So I respect that law enforcement wants to come on board now, but we don't have the luxury of waiting. And so I would move that we go forward with the contract. These people are experts. We're paying them to do it. They're going to show up. My concern about our local law enforcement, they could have some other kind of disaster tomorrow or some other kind of urgent need that will divert them from being able to provide the services they said. And I totally understand that and respect that. If we're paying these people, they're going to have to show up and do their work because that's their only job. Law enforcement has a lot of other things. And even though I know they want to come to campus with their dog, they might not be able to. And that's more months going by where children are not getting this alternative message through the dogs that might work for them. So I'd like to approve the contract. But
Trustee
I'll
Nelson?
go with the will of the board.
Megan, I am totally with you. I think we need to do something quick. What I would like to propose is that we approve the contract and the superintendent can utilize it if she needs to, but we give our local law enforcement a chance. And part of that thought for me is just being budget conscious. But the other thought is if we can save that $30,000, put it towards drug counseling or propaganda or something to help assist in what the dogs are doing, it'd be nice to save that $30 and try out our local law enforcement. But I think it'd be nice to have the superintendent have this tool. If it's not working, she can jump on it.
Superintendent Cuban?
And I want to reassure the board or assure the board that, to me, I'm with you, Megan, this is an urgent need, and we have half the year gone already. We do not need to wait. So I will tell you now that we will get on this right away, either way. And I will not let time go by where this is not happening.
So, other comments?
I think we're ready for a motion.
Or we have 2 possible motions here. Is there?
I want to approve the contract now and get it going now. So if there's a different motion on the table, I'll vote no. It'll probably pass anyway. I know this is urgent to everybody, but I'm not letting anything go by. I'm not letting a moment go by that we're not doing all we can. So, but it'll be a good outcome no matter what happens, but I don't think I'm the right person to make the motion, Zoe, is what I'm saying.
So Zoe, the recommended motion is to direct staff to get an MOU with law enforcement and to approve the contract and have the superintendent have the discretion to implement it as needed.
I would like to make that motion.
I'd second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No. No.
Okay. And you'll let us know
Or will.
what happens
On it tomorrow.
Okay. Superintendent's report.
Just a couple of things. I know it's super late. Thank you for doing that. I know it's hard to do things like that, but I think we have a variety of strategies that we're using, and that coupled with all of the really great counseling work and everything that's going on, I think will make a difference. In my experience, it makes a difference. It has made a difference in other schools that I've been in. Dara mentioned Saturday school. We are implementing Saturday school across the district for ADA recovery, for alternatives to suspension, and for enrichment. So any student who's missed a day of school, we're targeting our chronically absent students first. And then, if my students were sick, I could bring them to school on a Saturday and they'd make up their day. So Santa Rosa City Schools has a very effective program, and we're modeling ours after their program. It's super new. It's not new for secondary schools, but Saturday school at the elementary level is pretty new. So we are working on that. I today just sent out a bunch of materials to the principals, sample letters, sample programs. And so it's another strategy for us to work on chronic absenteeism and our attendance percentage. And it's getting implemented this month. So there will be no cost to the district. It's actually a recovery of ADA. So that's interesting, exciting, and very new and very fast implementation. I think I've said a lot tonight. I'm super grateful to the staff. I loved having kids here tonight. It warms my heart to see the really great work that they're doing and to see the enthusiasm of those teachers and the families. It's really exciting. I always love having kids around. I'm grateful to the board for taking a risk on that and other new and innovative programs, and I think it will definitely pay off. So love that. And interestingly, ACSA, Association of California School Administrators, has endorsed Marshall Tuck, the other candidate. I was chuckling with Terry. So anyway, it's just kind of interesting people's perspectives on different things, but that's it. And I think that's all, unless the board has any questions for me.
I have a question about Breakfast Club.
Yes.
No, so I think
I
my
love that
confusion
movie.
about Saturday schools, I imagine Breakfast Club, like that's what I have in my mind, but is it, I guess I'm confused. Is it optional? That's always my Saturday school idea.
It's different for elementary schools.
So
I
it's
mean,
not really Breakfast Club?
Well, at the high school, it's more breakfast
Okay.
clubby, but at the elementary schools, I mean, in talking with Santa Rosa City Schools, kids and parents love Saturday school at the elementary school. They're
So-
doing a lot of enrichment activities and for some of it. So they can do intervention. We're letting the schools design their programs. We've given a lot of ideas, but at the elementary level, it's not very breakfast clubby.
But it's something optional for you to bring your kid to if they missed a day of school?
Kids will get invited to
Okay.
the Saturday Academy or whatever it's going to be called, and they have to RSVP.
Okay.
So, and we're staffing, we've got a low staffing ratio, and at the elementary schools, we'll add a paraprofessional in as well. So the paraprofessional can help with bathroom breaks and, getting lunch. We will serve a meal, not in the cafeteria. It'll be more of a grab and go. And the high school's been doing Saturday school for a long time. Our middle schools haven't done it, so they'll be starting their programs, and then it's totally brand new for our elementary programs. So it'll be a new adventure.
I just, we have no concern about staffing it.
We've had staff members indicate that they're interested.
So they get supplemental? or
They will get their hourly supplemental pay.
And one other question, you talked about possibly it being used for students who might be expelled,
Suspended.
suspended.
It's
So I'm just-
alternative to
I just
suspension.
assume we'll have a plan for behavior problems.
Yes. There will be an administrator available via phone call.
Any board member reports? Oh, Mr. Nelson.
While we're not allowed to directly address our public, it's so nice when people come with opinions and share them with us. So I just want to thank the public very much for staying so late, especially when it's a thought that I hadn't had. So it was, anyways, I really appreciate it. Thank you. And then the other thing is CSBA is going to have a legislative day in March, I believe. My intention is to go to it. I would like to invite anybody. I think the superintendent may have been interested, but I just wanted to have you guys think about it. I don't have any more information about it, but I believe
You won't know the day.
it happens in March.
You don't know the day.
It's on my calendar. No.
It was on some website, and they talked about registry, you have to register ahead of time.
I'm getting the date. March 13th.
What day of the week is that?
Deb, do you know what day of the week that is? Anybody have a calendar up?
Oh, it's a Tuesday, it's a
It's a
Tuesday.
Tuesday. Oh, we have a board workshop that day.
Shucks.
You guys be back
We
by
could
five.
always postpone the board workshop to the fall. Sorry.
What is the topic?
It's on strategy. isn't it?
Instructional practices.
Instructional practices and teacher retention /
Apparently that's the one you're Yeah, could we?
We'll ponder
We'll
it.
ponder, okay. Any other board member reports? No? Moving to expulsions. Is there a motion to suspend the expulsion of student AA 2018 for the spring semester of 2018 and the fall 18-19 school year?
I so move.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Abstention?
I'm going to abstain for this one and the remainder.
Okay. Motion to suspend the expulsion of student BB 218 for the spring semester of 2018 and the fall of 18-19 school year.
I so move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Megan is abstaining. Motion to suspend the expulsion of student CC 2018 for the spring semester of 2018 and the fall of 18-19 school year.
I so move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Megan's abstaining. Motion to expel student DD 2018 for the spring semester of 2018 and for the fall of the 18-19 school year.
I so move.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion to expel student EE 2018 for the spring of 2018 and the fall of the 18-19 school year.
I so move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion to suspend the expulsion of student FF 2018 for the spring semester of 2018 and the fall of the 18-19 school year.
I so move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion to suspend the expulsion of student GG 2018 for the spring semester of 2018 and the fall of the 18-19 school year.
I so move.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Readmissions. A motion to readmit student AA 2018.
I so move.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion to readmit student BB 2018.
I so move.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye. God, that's depressing.
Okay, and the consent agenda, is there a motion, the consent agenda is as is? Oh, we pulled two items,
Pulled
that's
two
right.
items,
18 and
19 and
20 are gone. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I so move.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Moving right along
Okay, Dan.
to planning.
Hey, Zoe, you're on your schedule.
Close, I forgot about the expulsions.
So we're agenda planning on January 30th at noon.
I am long overdue.
January.
You available?
Volunteering.
I'm available.
Oh my God. Okay, I will do it.
January 30th at 12 o'clock.
January 30th.
Yep, Tuesday.
We have a visit at Eagle Peak. Will we be back by noon?
Yes.
Okay.
Any other items, Deb?
We have a special board meeting on January 31st, that's 5 to 7, here, and then the board workshop
Here.
on February 6th, 5:30 to 7.
And then a board meeting.
And then the board meeting, February 8th.
February 6th, was it?
Yes.
5:30, okay, and then what was the next one?
Previous
The
one
8th
was
is just a board
31st.
meeting.
Special board meeting.
And there's board meeting.
Okay, I'm going to adjourn that meeting. Thank you very much.
Good job.